Thank you. The next item of business is a statement by John Swinney on the Local Government Finance Settlement 2013-14. The Cabinet Secretary will take questions at the end of his statement, and there should therefore be no interventions or interruptions. Mr Swinney, you've got 10 minutes.
Presiding Officer, my statement today will cover two areas. I will set out the terms of the Provisional Local Government Finance Settlement for 2013-14, and I will make a number of announcements on business rates. This settlement is firmly set within the context of the ongoing relationship between the Scottish Government and local government. We have reaffirmed our commitment to working together on our joint priorities to deliver better outcomes for the people and communities of Scotland. As a result of our partnership working, we have worked closely with local government to provide fair and equitable settlements. Between 2007-8 and 2012-13, the resources available to the Scottish Government through a combination of DEL and non-domestic rates increased by 6.4%. Over the same period, local government's budget increased by 8.9%, demonstrating the strong financial settlement we have agreed with local government during challenging financial times. Following Spending Review 2011, total funding for local government over the 2012-15 period would be a larger share of the funds controlled by the Scottish Government than the position we inherited in 2007-8 when we first came to office. In 2013-14, our departmental expenditure limit will decrease in cash terms compared to the previous year by £162 million, which is the equivalent to a real terms cut of 3%. Despite this, our record shows that we have provided a fair settlement to local government, which continues to represent the best outcome that can be achieved in the current financial climate. Presiding Officer, the draft budget 2013-14, published on the 20th of September, confirmed our draft budget for the second year of our current spending review period, including the headline allocations for local government. However, this local government finance settlement comes at a time of major restructuring of the services delivered by local authorities, with the creation of the new police authority and fire service. As a result, funding for police and fire has been removed from the settlement for 2013-14, which means exact funding comparisons with previous years are no longer possible. Today, I can announce the provisional funding allocations to individual local authorities for 2013-14. Copies of summary tables containing the key information in my statement are available at the back of the Chamber. The Government reached agreement with the COSLA leadership on an approach to delivering joint priorities between national and local government. This was described in my letter to COSLA of the 21st of September last year, which set out the terms of the local government settlement for 2012-15. As part of the settlement, local authorities will deliver certain specific commitments: freezing the council tax, which is continuing to help families through tough economic times, and maintaining teacher numbers in line with pupil numbers, and securing places for all probationers under the teacher induction scheme. However, the package being offered to local authorities is conditional. Although it is agreed between the Government and COSLA's leadership in principle, it is now up to individual authorities to decide whether they wish to accept it. If they accept, they will receive their needs-based share of the overall revenue funding. If they choose not to accept, they will not receive their full share of the package of resources. The conditional amount of the overall package is worth in total £109 million across the whole of local government, and includes £70 million for the council tax freeze and £39 million for the teacher commitments. Presiding Officer, the total support for local government in 2013-14 will amount to over £9.9 billion, which includes revenue and capital funding along with income raised from business rates. This represents an increase in funding of £35.2 million on a comparable basis with 2012-13. Within the total available, support for revenue will amount to £9.4 billion next year. This revenue allocation represents a flat cash settlement on a like-for-like basis. There have been a number of changes to the local government budget for 2013-14. The changes to revenue funding included in the draft budget were as follows: a net reduction of £954.7 million as a result of the transfer of responsibility for policing to the new Scottish Police Authority, a net reduction of £274.8 million as a result of the transfer of responsibility for the fire service to the new Scottish Fire and Rescue Service, an increase of £23 million following the UK Government's abolition of council tax benefit. As agreed with local government, 80% of this sum will be distributed initially, with the final 20% distributed as a redetermination when the 2012-13 data is available, and an additional £3 million for free personal and nursing care. There have also been a number of changes to the local government budget since the draft budget was published. These are as follows: £1.5 million has been made available for the provision of early learning and childcare for looked-after 2-year-olds, £3 million for family support funding and £720,000 for the Blue Badge scheme. In addition, and not included in today's figures, is the monies transferring from DWP for the Devolved Social Fund programme, which is subject to final agreement with the Department of Work and Pensions and COSLA. Although the net reduction for police included in the 2013-14 draft budget document was £954.7 million, this figure may reduce slightly following ongoing discussions with individual authorities and the current police boards. The outcome of the consultation process will determine the exact figure to be removed. Following the outcome of Spending Review 2011, overall local government capital funding was increased by £34.7 million in 2013-14 and £47.6 million in 14-15 as a result of consequential funding announced at Stage 3 of the 2012-13 Budget Bill. This delivered on the Government's commitment to maintain local government's share of the total capital budget at 28%. Following the transfer of responsibility for the police and fire services, capital funding has been reduced by a total of £29.9 million in 2013-14. This means that capital funding for local government in the settlement for next year amounts to £500 million. In addition, local government will also benefit from capital funding from the school building programme, estimated at £61.2 million, and digital infrastructure of £14.8 million in 2013-14. Presiding Officer, I now turn to business rates, which are a key issue for Scotland's business community and an integral part of local government finance. This administration acknowledges that business rates play a part in attracting and retaining businesses in Scotland. We are delivering the most competitive business rates available anywhere in the United Kingdom, for example through the Small Business Bonus Scheme, which I am delighted to say is at a record high, with over 89,000 business properties benefiting. In our election manifesto and as part of our economic strategy, we committed that we would not allow the poundage for business rates to rise above what it is in England during the lifetime of this Parliament. The UK Government is expected to announce the English poundage in the next few days. However, I can reaffirm my commitment to match the English poundage and will confirm the Scottish poundage rate as soon as possible after the rate for England is announced. As well as maintaining a competitive approach on business rates, we must also acknowledge the fact that business rates are an integral part of our public finances that help fund the services on which our communities and businesses rely. That is why I have committed to embark on a review of business rates in advance of the next revaluation to provide the best support we can for business. Presiding Officer, I am pleased to confirm today the publication of our business rates consultation, which will provide a comprehensive and fundamental review of the rating system. The consultation delivers on my commitment to undertake a review and will enable us to seek the views of all business ratepayers, representative bodies, professional advisers and agents and citizens. The scope of the consultation will seek views on the full spectrum of business rates policy, including the effectiveness of current reliefs, transparency and openness, and tax avoidance. In addition, I am aware that some ratepayers are dissatisfied with the appeal system, and the consultation poses questions on how this can be improved. Any changes to the rating system resulting from this consultation will be put in place in time for the next revaluation, but where early actions are identified and affordable, these can be implemented much sooner. However, I must emphasise that the needs of all ratepayers must be balanced against the need to fund services, so the cost of any reforms must be balanced from savings elsewhere within the rating system. Presiding Officer, the next revaluation would normally have taken place in 2015, but as Parliament will know, the United Kingdom Government has taken the decision to delay its next revaluation to 2017. This decision creates a set of circumstances that could undermine our commitment to match the poundage rate south of the border. Given the fact that for many years before we took office, business rates were set at a higher level than the rest of the UK, I believe that this is a danger that must be avoided. I can confirm, therefore, that the date of the next revaluation will be 2017. By that stage, the Scottish Government is confident we will have a range of economic powers achieved through independence that can create further competitive advantage for Scottish business. In conclusion, Presiding Officer, the outcome of Spending Review 2011 maintained local government's revenue funding and ensured that local authorities would receive a larger share of the funds contributed by the Scottish Government, including business rates, than the position we inherited in 2007-8. The provisional allocations that I have announced to Parliament today maintain our social contract with the Scottish people and ensures that the revenue funding available to local government for their remaining responsibilities is maintained. The revenue allocations are inclusive of resources to enable local authorities to continue to freeze their council tax, a crucial element of the social contract with Scotland. One bill that, in the face of increasing costs, families can know will not rise. I hope all local authorities will take up that offer and deliver a much-needed boost for hard-pressed families in these tough times. In line with our manifesto and economic strategy, I am also delighted to have confirmed for 2013-14 that the Scottish Government will again deliver on our commitment to businesses, that we would not allow the poundage rate for business rates to rise above what it is in England during the lifetime of this Parliament. To keep Scotland at its competitive edge, I have today launched our consultation on business rates to provide a thorough and comprehensive review of the business rates system in advance of the next revaluation to take place in 2017. Presiding Officer, today marks the start of the normal consultation period with local government on the provisional allocations. I will bring final figures to Parliament as part of the Local Government Finance Order early in the new year.
That ends the statement by the Cabinet Secretary on the Local Government Finance Settlement 2013-2014. The Cabinet Secretary will now take questions on issues raised in his statement. I intend to allow around 20 minutes for the questions and then we'll move on to next business. It would be helpful if members who wish to ask a question were to request to speak, press the request to speak button now, and I call on Sarah Boyack.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and can I thank the Cabinet Secretary for advance copy of his statement. I do want to say how disappointed I am at its contents, however. Although it's no surprise, given that local services took the lion's share of the cuts last year, the reality of this settlement will be tough across Scotland. Most of the questions in Professor Bell's report to the Finance Committee this year focused on local government, but we've yet to hear answers from the Cabinet Secretary on those vital questions. The Cabinet Secretary calls this a fair budget, but where's the analysis of the impact on jobs and the people who rely on services who will see their services cut or increased charges? And as the Scottish Government publishes its paper on support and growth, where is the acknowledgement that capital for local authorities has been slashed and that the squeeze on revenue will mean that prudential borrowing just isn't an option for the projects that are needed locally? And local companies rely on projects by local authorities, and they rely on people spending locally in their shops and local businesses, and this squeeze is not going to make it easy for them. The SNP like to talk about shovel-ready projects, and local authorities are ready with their shovels, but they don't have the cash to get social rented housing built again, a key building block for Scotland's recovery. And where's the fairness for people who will find their services
really does need to come to an end now,
and their charges increased, the cost of the underfunded council tax freeze? We just need to know how many jobs will be lost. There's nothing in here about wages. We'd welcome the fact that living wage is now being adopted across Scotland, but how many jobs will go in our local authorities in the next 12 months?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, can I reiterate to Sarah Boyack that the local government settlement that the Government has put forward is based on a strong series of financial settlements that we've put in place to local government, and the analysis that I provided Parliament was that in the period between 2007-8 and 12-13, the Scottish Government's income had increased by 6.4%, but the local government budget had increased by 8.9%. Now that demonstrates, and I'll explain it quite simply, is that local government's allocation of resources has grown at a faster rate than the overall budget of the Scottish Government. Now, that, to me, is a good settlement for local government. Now, Sarah Boyack then went on to talk about reductions in capital. I don't know if it's missed the Labour Party, but the United Kingdom Government has dramatically reduced capital expenditure budgets across the United Kingdom. And I cannot allocate money, and I go round the houses on this point frequently with the Labour Party, I cannot allocate money I don't have. Local government has been assured that it would have 28% of the capital budget available to the Scottish Government as part of this spending review settlement, and that is what I have fulfilled. I'm glad that Sarah Boyack acknowledges that the leadership of the Government on the living wage issue is encouraging more participation by local authorities in taking up this particular priority. I welcome unreservedly the number of local authorities that are now paying the living wage, and I welcome that on behalf of the Scottish Government, and I'm delighted that our partners in local government are working with us so effectively in that respect. And in relation to the approach to borrowing by local government has a prudential code to follow in relation to borrowing for capital investment purposes. The First Minister and Councillor O'Neill, the President of COSLA, wrote jointly to all local authorities in September encouraging the maximisation of investment in capital projects. I've seen a number of very helpful and very positive responses from the leaders of local authorities in Scotland of all political persuasions, and I welcome the contribution that they've made to that process of strengthening the capital expenditure provisions within Scotland in such difficult financial times.
Margaret Mitchell.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I thank the Cabinet Secretary for advance sight of his statement. In this financial statement, he states that the revaluation of business rates will be delayed until 2017. I would therefore be grateful if the Cabinet Secretary could confirm the following. 1. Who specifically was consulted about this decision? 2. Why has there been no public consultation in advance of this decision being taken? And would he explain why it's taken him 11 months to launch the business rate review consultation, which he promised last December would follow shortly?
Cabinet Secretary.
If I could say to Margaret Mitchell that clearly I've set out the decision that I've taken on the business rates revaluation issue. It is one that I have taken for the reasons of ensuring that we can fulfil our commitment to match the English poundage for the duration of this parliamentary term, which was the commitment that we made to the people of Scotland in our election manifesto. In relation to the question of public consultation, clearly there are regulatory provisions that have to be put in place to delay a revaluation. They will be subject to parliamentary scrutiny and dialogue within Parliament, and of course that gives rise to consultation in that respect. On her final point in relation to the timing of the consultation on business rates, I took a decision after I made the comment to Parliament, which she said that, which she correctly identifies, that I would wait for the outcome of a significant case in relation to business rates, which was heard by the Court of Session in May. So I waited until that. I expected to have the outcome of that within a number of weeks after May. I didn't get the outcome of that until much later in the year. I don't think, if my memory serves me right, I don't think we got the outcome of that until October. As a consequence, I didn't think it was sensible to proceed with the consultation until I had the opinion of the court, because it was a fundamental issue in relation to material change of circumstances. So that's the rationale for why the government has held off issuing the consultation paper until such time as that court judgment was with us, to enable us to have a more open discussion based on the knowledge that we gained from the judgment from the court. And of course the consultation period is now open, and I very much look forward to the input from all interested parties to that process.
Kevin Stewart, to be followed by Anne McTaggart.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can I ask the Cabinet Secretary to outline how schemes such as the business rates and incentivisation scheme are benefiting councils who are successful in attracting new investment in their communities, please?
Cabinet Secretary.
The business rates incentivisation scheme was designed to essentially provide a motivation for local authorities to encourage economic growth within their localities. It enables local authorities to share a greater proportion of the proceeds of the growth in business rates in their localities than has been the case in the past. We have now given to local authorities the framework within which they can operate in that respect, and obviously that provides flexibility for local authorities to try to encourage a greater degree of economic activity as a consequence of the work that they undertake in that respect. So I very much encourage local government to take a full part in that scheme, which I think can deliver real benefits to local economies as a consequence of a greater degree of growth that can be delivered as a consequence of the actions of local government in Scotland.
Anne McTaggart, followed by Kenneth Gibson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government how it will ensure that the transfer of financial resources and responsibilities to Scotland's new police and fire services will impact upon local government budget settlements, and furthermore to ask how the Scottish Government will ensure that any initial or subsequent adjustments to these figures
are redistributed in a way that is both transparent and accountable to local government, the residents and businesses across Scotland's 32 local authorities?
Cabinet Secretary.
I have placed at the back of the chamber, Presiding Officer, a note which I think is as transparent as they get, although I would be the first to say it's quite complex, which goes through the way in which we have removed the element of local government funding that is related to police and fire services. There are a number of different adjustments that are set out in that note that is available at the back of the chamber, and members can scrutinise that. Obviously, in relation to ongoing budgets, this budget will no longer appear within the local government finance settlement. It will appear within the justice budget on an ongoing basis. So therefore the parliamentary scrutiny will be focused on the contents of the Justice Secretary's budget rather than to look at the local government settlement. I did mention in my statement that there is one remaining adjustment to be made in relation to some of the funding arrangements that affect a couple of boards in Scotland today, and those judgments are yet to be arrived at. The sum of money that is involved is relatively small in the grand scheme of things, but we are continuing those discussions to seek agreement on the final adjustments that will be required. But I stress that that applies to, I think, just 2 police board areas in Scotland.
Kenneth Gibson, to be followed by John Pentland.
I welcome the Cabinet Secretary's statement. In light of Sarah Boyack's contribution, can he tell us where local government be now if an assuming office he'd followed the advice of Labour's Wendy Alexander and top-sliced the local government budget by at least 3% year on year, and where our businesses would be if the tax rate poundage remained at an average of 8.5% above England's, as it was for 7 consecutive years under Labour and Liberal Democrats?
Cabinet Secretary.
What I can say to Mr Gibson on 2 points is that clearly I reiterate the fact that the local government budget has increased at a faster rate since 2007 than the Scottish Government's budget has increased, which I think demonstrates and validates the strong settlement that we have given to local government over the years. If Mr Gibson is to look at the consultation document which has been published by the Government today, he will see in figure 2 on in the document the relative poundage rates of Scotland and England in the period between 2000 to 2001 and 2007-8, in which he will see in every year the poundage rate was higher in Scotland than it was in England. And of course we have maintained the poundage rate throughout the period. And of course, in also looking at the position in relation to small business rates, for example, our predecessors spent between £20 and £25 million between 2003, 2004 and 2007-8 in each year on the small business rates relief scheme. And since 2008-9, this government has spent between a low figure of £73 million when we started the scheme and the highest figure in 12-13 of £145 million, which I think is a rather clear illustration of the scale of assistance that's been put in place to the small business community in Scotland.
John Pentland, followed by Willie Rennie.
Cabinet Secretary, although the Local Government Committee has completed its budget report, this is my first chance to question you on it. We are asked to accept that this is a fair settlement, but how can it be fair that local government is carrying the overwhelming burden of Scottish Government cuts, and North Lanarkshire is suffering more than most, threatening services and over 1,000 jobs in an area that desperately needs economic growth? Will we get the chance to explore this issue through my committee?
Cabinet Secretary. Well, I most definitely have not refused an invitation to go to the Local Government Committee to discuss any of these things, and if the Local Government Committee wishes to question me about these things, I will of course I will of course attend to do that. I haven't had that request, but I will certainly do it if it comes. In relation to Mr Pentland's substantive point about local government and the reductions in public expenditure, I do have to come back to my point that I've made about 3 or 4 times now, that the Scottish Government's resources available to us have increased by 6.4% since 2007-8, but local governments have increased by 8.9%. Now, I don't know how one can look at those two figures and say that local government is bearing the lion's share of the cuts in public spending that are being undertaken. And I would just point out to Mr Pentland that between this year and next year, we are actually, on a like-for-like basis, allocating more resources to local government, albeit for specific purposes that we have agreed with local government in relation to council tax benefit, free personal care and other matters which are included in the settlement I have announced today.
Will Rennie to be followed by Willie Coffey.
Thanks to the Finance Secretary for an advanced copy of his statement. Can I ask him about the commitment he made last year that every council in Scotland would receive at least 85% of average funding? We supported him last year in order for Aberdeen to get extra finance for that to be achieved then. Since then, the fire and police funding has been reviewed as he set out. But it now seems that Aberdeen City has now fallen to 79% of the average. Can he confirm that it will make up that difference to 85%?
Cabinet Secretary.
What we do on local government funding is, and it's continuing the practice of our predecessors, is that once we establish a spending review settlement for a 3-year period, we apply to that the various, let me call them protective measures for local government finance over that 3-year period. So, for example, the funding floor that is applied to protect a range of different local authorities from changes in the settlement over the 3-year period. And last year I applied the approach which gave further protection for the City of Edinburgh and City of Aberdeen councils as we had set out that we would do so. So that is applied over the duration of the spending review, so there would be no review of that undertaken until we embark on a further spending review after the conclusion, or to provide for funding after the conclusion of the 2014-15 financial year. And that continues the practice of our predecessors in office.
Willie Coffey to be followed by Chick Brodie.
Thank you. Can the Cabinet Secretary outline how the local government settlement will take forward reform of public services and the proposals of the Christie Commission?
Cabinet Secretary.
In a range of different areas, local government is a central participant in the public sector reform work that the government is undertaking. We are taking forward a whole range of different responses to the Christie Commission, principally around about the integration and collaboration of public services at local level, in which local government is actively involved with a range of either third sector providers or the health service or with police services at local level. And then also in relation to the agenda on preventative expenditure, where local government are full and active partners with the government in taking forward that agenda. So I think there's a whole range of different areas where local government is actively involved in the public service reform agenda, and we welcome their participation in that process.
Can I just remind members that they should keep to issues that are in the statement itself before they raise a question? Chick Brodie to be followed by Neil Findlay.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The Cabinet Secretary should be aware that in the last financial year, South Ayrshire Council underspent its budget by just over £7 million, and after provisions, reserves and overspend, still had a net underspend of £3.7 million. It also invested £7 million in Birmingham and Salford City Councils at approximately half of the Bank of England base rate. Will the Cabinet Secretary reaffirm the guidance given by the Government and COSLA regarding local council investment and spend strategies, and will he consider the involvement of the Accounts Commission and Audit Scotland to ensure that this Council and others will fulfil their expenditure and monetary responsibilities in the current economic climate and in the future?
Cabinet Secretary.
There is, of course, guidance in place for local government in relation to their investment strategies as part of their Treasury function. Individual local authorities must make appropriate judgments about the destination for any investments that they undertake. They must take into account factors of risk, they must take into account factors of return, but it is fundamentally a matter for each local authority to determine. In relation to the role of the Accounts Commission will, of course, be actively involved in scrutinising all of these issues in relation to the financial performance of local authorities. So that independent scrutiny that Mr Brodie has requested is very much part of the existing arrangements.
Neil Findlay, followed by Colin Beattie.
Could I refer to the table given with the statement? Could I ask the Cabinet Secretary, given the appalling situation following the closure of halls at Broxburn, what additional finance is going to be provided to West Lothian Council to cope with the fallout from the halls closure?
Cabinet Secretary.
As Mr Findlay will know, that's a subject that's under active dialogue between myself and West Lothian Council. We are, of course, already providing practical assistance which comes at a cost to support many of the individuals who have already been made redundant by Halls of Broxburn, and so that financial contribution is taking place. It wouldn't be coming through the local government finance settlement. It's coming through other financial arrangements, and of course the task force will consider issues in relation to the economic recovery within West Lothian, and I have already signalled that the government will make financial contribution towards that process.
Given the importance of this statement, I intend to continue until all those who have requested a question have had the opportunity to do so. I call Colin Beattie to be followed by Mark Griffin.
Will the Cabinet Secretary outline what the impact of the public health supplement has been on businesses and how the proceeds from the supplement will be spent in the coming year?
Cabinet Secretary.
In relation to the public health supplement, the resources that have been generated from that form part of the assessment of non-domestic rates income that I have made within the budget settlement. In addition to that, we have clearly set out, in partnership with local government, various ways in which we take forward a range of preventative spending measures. They total over the spending review period £500 million, which are designed to ensure that we take early action to remedy some of the challenges and difficulties that we experience within our society. So the public health supplement forms part of the non-domestic rates income assessment that I have made, and also is reflected in the policy priorities of the spending review.
Mark Griffin, to be followed by Gavin Brown.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Cabinet Secretary if he will collate the savings packages that the 32 local authorities will produce as a result of the finance settlement outlined today, to allow his department to carry out a full economic impact assessment of those savings packages, and if he will make that information available to MSPs in the Chamber.
Cabinet Secretary.
That really is a matter for each individual local authority to take forward. That, as Mr Griffin will know from his experience in North Lanarkshire Council, that a range of options are put forward, a very large proportion of which are not pursued by the elected members, for the simple reason that they don't have to make all of the savings that are suggested. And of course the other thing is that as we go through a process of reform of public services, we clearly identify other and different ways in which public services can be delivered, which can have better outcomes for people in Scotland. So we should not be afraid to change the way in which we deliver public services to deliver better outcomes for the citizens of our country.
Gavin Brown, to be followed by a brief question from Margaret MacDonald, and that doesn't mean to say that Gavin Brown shouldn't be brief himself.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. How many local authorities will get a cash terms cut to their revenue budgets in 2013-14?
Cabinet Secretary.
Mr Brown will forgive me if I don't give him an answer to that specific question in relation to the budget today, but if he needs me to write to him about that later on, I certainly will do. I'm sure it's with a couple of minutes I could run my eye down the table and tell him the exact answer. The point I'd make to him is that the reason why any local authority will be receiving a cash terms cut is because of the application of the distribution formula between local authorities, which of course, as he will know, is affected by a wide variety of different indicators, principally population change, but a variety of other indicators on deprivation, on sparsity of population, on issues such as special island status and other matters of that nature, and those will be the factors that will be relevant. If he looks at the table that I've supplied the Chamber, he will see that the expenditure is totalling in 2012-13, taking account of police and fire changes, is 9.365 billion, and in 2013-14 it is 9.396 billion, which is, of course, a higher number than in 2012-13.
Margaret MacDonald.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. It was Mr Finlay's question that made me think about it. Will this budget be in any way affected if the worst happens in Clydeside and our shipyard is closed?
Cabinet Secretary.
The Government obviously responds to any particular circumstances that have an adverse economic impact on different parts of the country with a variety of different interventions. And the Government is working, of course, to avoid the outcome that Margaret MacDonald has suggested, and will continue to do so with all of our efforts.
We now move on to the next item of business, which is a debate on motion number 4970, in the name of Fiona Hislop on St Andrew's Day, a celebration of Scotland. Members who wish to take part in the debate should press the request to speak buttons now. And I'll give a few moments for the front benches to sort themselves out. Members who leave the chamber should do so quietly. I now call on Fiona Hislop to speak to move the motion. Cabinet Secretary, you've got 13 minutes.
Presiding Officer, I move the motion in my name, and I'm delighted to open this debate on St Andrew's Day, a celebration of Scotland. I hope this will give us the opportunity to discuss what is great about Scotland and how we can use St Andrew's Day to celebrate our history, our people, our culture and our world-famous food and drink. And of course, it was a remarkable journey that took St Andrew from being a fisherman on the Sea of Galilee to being patron saint of Scotland. From that beginning, St Andrew became a disciple of Jesus, later an apostle in Asia Minor, Macedonia and southern Russia, after being crucified in the year AD 70 in Patras in Greece. His journey did not end there. After his death, legend has it that the monk St Rugulus or St Rule was instructed in a dream to take St Andrew's remains to the ends of the earth for safekeeping. St Rule did as he was told, removing some of the bones and taking them to a town then called Kilremont, which is now called St Andrews. Such was the veneration for St Andrew that this led to St Andrews becoming the ecclesiastical centre of the medieval Scottish Church with a great cathedral. That in turn led to Bishop Wardlaw of St Andrews establishing a centre for learning, and 599 years ago he secured the papal bull that established St Andrews University as Scotland's oldest university and the third oldest university in the English-speaking world. And I think that St Andrews' journey can still speak to us today. In life, his missions brought people together across many lands in new friendship and faith. In death, the journey of his remains to Scotland led in time to a flourishing of learning and literacy. And I want to touch on these two themes this afternoon. So St Andrew's Day is a thoroughly appropriate occasion for Scots and friends of Scotland at home and abroad to join together in fellowship to mark our national culture and heritage. The Government will be active on a number of fronts. Tomorrow, the First Minister will host the Brave at Heart St Andrews Awards in Bute House, and Angela Constance, Minister for Youth Employment, will host a St Andrew's Day concert by celebrated Scottish band Manran in our EU office in Brussels. On St Andrew's Day itself, the Cabinet Secretary for Education and Lifelong Learning, Mike Russell, will be attending a St Andrew's Day dinner at James Watt College in North Ayrshire. The Cabinet Secretary for Justice will be at Edinburgh Castle to witness the St Andrew's Day event, which promises to be a carnival of contemporary dance, light show, fireworks and a unique twist on the Scottish pipes and drums. The Cabinet Secretary for Finance and Sustainable Growth will be attending an event in Perth as part of Scotland Sings, a brand new national event bringing participants and audiences together through community singing events. I do not know if he will be singing, but I'm sure if members attend, they perhaps may see if he does. For myself on St Andrew's Day, I'll be at the Saltire Literary Awards 2012. This is being delivered in partnership with the Scottish Book Trust and the National Library of Scotland. I look forward to presenting the Book of the Year Award. Now, that is just some of what the Government is doing to celebrate St Andrew's Day. I know MSPs from across the Chamber will be joining together to celebrate Scotland on St Andrew's Day at events across the country. Last week I wrote to all MSPs setting out a range of events taking place, giving details of the Scotland.org website, and it's worth noting and exploring to find out what is on St Andrew's Day and the themed events that are happening in your area or indeed all over the world. A good example of what happens internationally. During my visit to the USA last November, I was privileged to participate in the Alexandria Christmas Parade, which takes place over the St Andrews Day weekend in the suburbs of Washington. A sight to behold, 30,000 walkers, mass pipes and drums, and, presiding officer, the largest collection of Scotty dogs that I think I've ever seen. Now, St Andrews Day is not just important in itself, it fires the starting gun for Scotland's Winter Festivals programme, a time when we welcome visitors from around the world to bring in the new year at the home of Hogmanay to celebrate Burns Night in the land of the Bard's birth. The Scottish Government will be part-funding 17 events in 9 local authority areas over the Winter Festivals period. Of these, 5 will take place around St Andrews Day in Edinburgh, Glasgow, Stirling, St Andrews and East Lothian. And I do welcome Patricia Fergus's amendment. I think the sense is absolutely right. All of us can and should share in the saltire and in the celebrations that take place. But to Annabel Goldie, I'm rather bemused by her amendment. It looks as if it's some kind of crude attempt to hijack what should be a celebratory debate by hijacking it for unionist purposes. Now, I was in Cardiff yesterday, and if I was to ask and suggest to a Welshman, that he could only celebrate St David's Day if it was as part of the UK, I think they would just laugh. Can I say to Annabel Goldie, she should be quite comforted that it is perfectly possible for unionists to celebrate Scotland for its distinct and individual identity. There's room in the tent of celebration for even Annabel Goldie, so I hope that she will take part in that. Indeed, would you like to take an intervention?
Annabel Goldie, Cabinet Secretary, for her graciousness in permitting an intervention. I know she doesn't care for the impact of history, but the fact is that Scotland within this enduring union, which receives my approval, it may not receive the Cabinet Secretary's approval, has actually achieved many great things, being distinctively Scottish, but as part of that union. And I can't believe the Cabinet Secretary would not want to reflect that. That would seem uncharacteristically churlish.
Cabinet Secretary. We could debate who's churlish, but I would accept that this is not a crude attempt in her amendment to hijack the debate for constitutional purposes. If she could list me the whole range of events that will be taking place that will be celebrating Scotland's place as part of the UK on Friday. And if she can't list me a range of events, perhaps she could list me a few, and then perhaps I might accept that she wasn't trying to hijack the debate for constitutional purposes. Now, Presiding Officer, we have, as a government, we've worked hard to increase interest in Scotland's National Day. We continue to encourage all parts of Scotland, public bodies in particular, to recognise St Andrews Day. But as a government, we would be keen to see more participate. Now, it's worth noting that the number of public holidays that Scotland recognises, currently 9 days, is lower than many of the European neighbours, where some have as many as 14 per day. Now, I mentioned earlier how St Andrew inspired a first flowering of higher education in Scotland. That began the great movement that led us to having 4 universities at a time when England had only 2. And because of the graduates that they produced, we had enough teachers to establish the first universal public education system in the world, with a school in every parish. So it's entirely fitting for schools and preschools to celebrate Scotland and its culture by marking St Andrews Day. Edinburgh Castle is running activities for pupils in primary classes 4 to 7 in the run-up to St Andrews Day. Pupils are encouraged to visit one of Scotland's most iconic castles and to find out more about Scotland's history. The St Andrews Day Debating Championship will take place on the 3rd of December, with the final being chaired by the Deputy Presiding Officer. Education Scotland is working with the English Speaking Union and the Scottish Parliament to take forward the debate, which will reflect the Year of Creative Scotland and the forthcoming Year of Natural Scotland in 2013. Around 20 secondary schools and 7 universities will be represented. We've also been building up the offer of free access, which is mentioned in Patricia Ferguson's amendment, to key Scottish visitor attractions around St Andrews Day. The initiative over the St Andrews Day weekend has proved popular. It returns this year. I'm delighted to say that St Andrew's Cathedral, where the bones of the saints are said to be interred, will be open for free on St Andrew's Day itself, as well as St Andrew's Castle and Edinburgh Castle. For the first time this year, some of Scotland's sports centres will take part in St Andrew's Day. For example, at Thurso Swimming Pool, there will be free swimming for kids. At Port Glasgow Swimming Pool, there will be free swimming for those over 60. Many sports centres are offering discounts and free trials right across the weekend, starting on the 30th, in the lead-up to the Commonwealth Games in 2014. As I set out a few minutes ago, how St Andrews' legacy enabled Scotland to become the first country with universal public education is very important. That in turn led us to becoming the first country with universal literacy. This year, for the first time, we will celebrate that legacy by using St Andrews Day to launch a new initiative around literature. So we're celebrating our literary heritage on St Andrews Day through Book Week Scotland. Yesterday, we delivered on one of our manifesto commitments by marking the start of Book Week, Scotland's first national inclusive celebration of reading. Supported by Creative Scotland, the initiative has been delivered by the Scottish Book Trust in partnership with many other organisations. And I'd like to thank everyone involved for creating such an inclusive and diverse programme of activity for everyone to enjoy. The Book Week programme of activities will encourage Scots of all backgrounds and all ages to embark or continue a lifetime's journey of reading. We have a great programme of activity and events taking place, engaging local communities across the country. 100 authors in 100 libraries who will be sharing their love of books with those who attend events across Scotland. The Scottish Library Service has created a national programme of writer events in libraries, which has been supported through the Scottish Libraries Information Council. The Royal Institute for Blind People Scotland will open its transcription services in Partick to show people how to make a book for someone with sight loss or how to create writing in Braille. I'd also encourage everyone to get a copy of the book My Favourite Place. This is a collection of stories about Scotland's best-loved places by the public and some of our best-loved authors, such as Alistair Gray and Liz Lockhead. Copies available from bookshops, public libraries and at National Trust properties. Indeed.
Margaret MacDonald. Thank you, Presiding Officer. It's a very impressive list, but I wonder about something a bit more imaginative. A huge prize, it's the St Andrews Day prize, that everybody knows what it stands for, because there are so many events that you've mentioned, the Minister has mentioned, dotted about the country. And they're all good, but they don't hang together well.
Cabinet Secretary. I think that's a very good point. It's one of the reasons I will just come on to in terms of the issue of having the national prize, the book prize, particularly the Saltire Society runs, actually happening on St Andrews Day as a St Andrews Prize. Now, in terms of our culture, it's many and varied. We are focusing this year on celebrating literary culture, but I think a concept of having a prize is one that I very much am attracted by. So we will be having events, particularly this year, focused on Book Week Scotland. I think if it's successful, it's something that can continue. We'll be having events, for example, for toddlers and preschools. We're also having a St Andrews Day reading hour. It will take place on the 30th of November at 11 o'clock, and the idea is to encourage a call for everyone to celebrate reading. It can happen anywhere, any place, any time. The National Museum of Scotland is taking a lead on that, and there will be a reading event at the National Museum of Scotland with Reading Hour with Alexander McCall-Smith and reading activities from babies to pensioners. So I hope everyone will celebrate reading in terms of our celebration of our culture. It will help in skills employability, but also indeed in self-improvement. And the turn of a page will take us to new countries, new horizons, and extends our human sympathies. And no wonder Abraham Lincoln reported to have given credit to the role of novelist Harriet Beecher Stowe in her great anti-slavery novel Uncle Tom's Cabin in slave emancipation. So our literary heritage is central to Scotland, and that's why I do think celebrating literature and having a prize given on St Andrews Days for the best of our Scottish literature is something that I think marks the importance of where we want to place our celebrations. We know that Robert Burns' message rings out long and clear. Sir Walter Scott's historical novels, enthralling 19th century Europe, inspiring others in Alessandro Manzoni and Adam Mickiewicz, for example, in Italy and Poland. And more recently, we've got giants, whether it's the debates we've had, most recently on Sunset Song in this Parliament, our modern writers, Liz Lockhead, Janice Galloway, J.K. Rowling, etc. So the Book Week is an important part of our celebration. Presiding Officer, I said at the beginning of this debate it was a strange and remarkable journey that took St Andrew from the shores of the Sea of Galilee to the shores of St Andrews. That a Jewish fisherman, with the help of a Greek monk, could have such an effect on a country that he had never seen in life and probably scarcely knew existed, illustrates the way in which Scotland has always depended on the contribution not just of those born here, but those who have come here as visitors and immigrants. One Scotland, many cultures indeed. For me, what matters about St Andrew and Scotland is not the truth of the legend, but the effect of the legend, in helping Scotland become a nation of learning, literacy and literature. And that is why we are using literature, particularly during this year, to help celebrate and promote our National Day. And I want to finish by quoting one last inspirational author in his poem for the opening of this Parliament. Edwin Morgan wrote, "Light of the day shine in, light of the mind shine out. This St Andrew's Day will shine a light on Scotland, and I'm sure that during this debate we'll see the light of the mind shine out." Thank you.
Thank you. I now call on Patricia Ferguson to speak through and move Amendment 4970.2 with a generous 9 minutes.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I rise to move the amendment in my name and welcome the opportunity to take part in today's debate on the continuing relevance of St Andrew's Day to contemporary Scotland. I should perhaps signal at the outset that Scottish Labour will support the Government's motion, and I doubt there will be a single member in the Chamber who would have any difficulty with the sentiments it expresses. And similarly, I'm pleased that the Government supports Labour's addendum amendment, which we believe strengthens the Government motion, and I'm very pleased that the Cabinet Secretary has recognised that. We will also support the Conservative amendment, as we do not feel that we have the same difficulties with it as perhaps some others seem to do. We Scots cannot claim exclusivity when it comes to our nation's patron saint, with Greece, Russia, Romania, Ukraine, Barbados and the ecumenical Patriarchate of Constantinople all claiming St Andrew as their patron saint, while both Germany and Poland also have long celebrated the day too. Now, we in Scotland have only recently begun to celebrate, at least in a coordinated and national way, St Andrew's Feast Day as our national holiday, so perhaps we don't yet have the kind of traditions attached to the 30th of November that can be found in many other countries. And I was intrigued to read that many of those traditions seem to be associated with young women trying to find a husband or to work out when they might be married, sometimes by following very complicated rituals that perhaps owe more to wishful thinking than to saintly intervention. I intend to say more about our celebrations later in my speech, but I would want now to note that part of Scottish Labour's amendment is intended to stress that we think that St Andrew's Day is an integral part of this Parliament's promotion of a fair, inclusive and diverse Scottish society. As the then Communities Minister Malcolm Chisholm remarked at the passing of the St Andrew's Day Bank Holiday Act in 2007, Scotland is a place where we can all benefit from a diversity of cultures, religions and backgrounds. The contribution of everyone should be valued, and the events taking place on St Andrew's Day remind us of how rich our cultural influences are here in Scotland. And I think the Minister's outline of all the events that are taking place, or at least many of them, demonstrates how right Malcolm Chisholm was then and how relevant his words are to us today. And St Andrew's Day is not and must never become parochial. It must be about Scotland's place in the world. It is a celebration of our diverse modern Scotland, because Scotland today welcomes people from many nations and different ethnic origins. We have, as citizens, people from a variety of cultures and faiths, as well as people of no faith. And I welcome that, because I believe that it helps to make us all stronger. I would like to place on record today my congratulations, and I'm sure that of every member, to the Scottish Trade Union Congress for its continued and long-standing support for and organisation of the annual St Andrew's Day March and Rally against racism and fascism. There can be no place for bigotry in 21st century Scotland. And as the Minister rightly said, the phrase "One Scotland, Many Cultures," which has been a statement of Scottish Government policy over 2 political administrations, must remain as our approach. And Parliament must encourage and support such events to ensure that all citizens of Scotland have ownership of the St Andrew's Day celebrations and feel that they truly belong and are as relevant as anyone. As Scots in the past went out into the world, our population is now growing, partly at least as we attract more people to Scotland. And a modern, diverse Scotland welcomes people from across the world and embraces their enterprise, their culture and their ambition. On St Andrew's Day, therefore, we should celebrate not just shared Scottish traditions, but our shared future too. And just as the broad definition of culture leads to the celebration of diversity, so its narrower artistic definition inevitably leads us to the same conclusion. Indeed, as Scottish Labour's amendment reminds us, the winter festival that begins on St Andrew's Day culminates on Burns Night. Burns, an internationally recognised genius whose art is outward-looking and encompasses universal themes that, frankly, should be celebrated throughout the year and not just on the 25th of January. So how is Scotland celebrating its National Day? I was very pleased to find that Historic Scotland is giving free entry to many of its properties on the day. But in looking again, I found that the offer seems to extend this year to only one day and not to the entire weekend, as I recall it did last year. Now, it may just be that that's because of the way St Andrew's Day happens to fall this year. But I do think that having the weekend available for those who perhaps don't enjoy the holiday would be helpful. St Andrews, as you would expect, is having a celebration, and Edinburgh Storytelling Centre will host a sing-along. Many of Edinburgh's other attractions, the Dungeon, Dynamic Earth, Mary King's Close, and my personal favourite, the Camera Obscura, have all special pricing arrangements over the weekend, which is to be welcomed. The Book Trust, as the Cabinet Secretary mentioned, has put out a lovely book called My Favourite Place, and as well as being available in local bookshops, I suspect it's probably available in an MSP's office near you, thanks to the Book Trust who provided them to us for distribution, and I'm certainly grateful to them for that. East Lothian, I was intrigued to see, is having a Saltire Festival, while Glasgow is branding its events under the heading Glasgow Loves St Andrew's Day. And apparently there will be a party in George Square on Friday night with pipes, drums and Highland dancing, and other events will carry on through until Sunday. And I noted that the organisers were promising there would be mayhem, and were warning that a kilted caricaturist would be on the loose. Why a kilted caricaturist should be particularly to be feared, I'm not sure, but I'll take the warning in the spirit of generosity in which it's clearly meant. Now, I may be biased in saying this, but I do feel that Glasgow has got the idea of this celebration better than some other areas. I'm sorry to Mrs MacDonald, but I did miss what she said, but I'm sure it was pithy. But I do feel that Glasgow has got the idea of this celebration. Ah, yes, and she thinks I am biased. Well, I'm sorry, I own up. Guilty as charged. But I do think that they have got the idea because they have put together a branded campaign and a coherent menu of new themed activities over the weekend that are specific celebrations of St Andrew's Day, which I think ties in actually with the point that she made during the Cabinet Secretary's contribution. And I hope to carry on that theme, that when Event Scotland and Visit Scotland come to review the programme for this year, that they will think about what more they can do to badge and brand events around Scotland so that it does become a better known set of festivals. And I hope that it will also help to attract more visitors in the future too. And I also wonder whether more could be done to encourage retailers to become involved. In the run-up to Christmas, as St Andrew's Day happens to fall, it seems to me that special events organised by traders and by stores around the 30th of November would perhaps help to encourage shoppers to patronise participating stores to a greater extent than perhaps they would normally do in that weekend. Now, there may be schemes such as this underway, but if they are, they have passed me by, and as an avid shopper, there's not much in that direction that passes me by. Mrs MacDonald.
Argo MacDonald.
I thank the member for giving way, and I'm not in the least biased, so here's an idea. Do you know how we wear Christmas tree badges and brooches and things at Christmas? I'm sure we could get something for St Andrew's Day that everybody could wear. It wouldn't be wrapped in a Union Jack right enough, but we could get something that we could all celebrate our common identity with.
Tricia Ferguson.
I thank Mrs MacDonald for that helpful suggestion. Perhaps a saltire and a Union Jack, or maybe that's pushing it a bit far. But I can just see the competition that we could organise amongst perhaps school children to identify such an image, and perhaps that is something that we would want to do in future years. Presiding Officer, with floods and bad weather the order of the day, it's sometimes difficult to think about celebrating anything at all at this time of year. But I genuinely look forward to hearing the contributions made by colleagues to this debate and of hearing from them about celebrations in their areas. And I hope very much to be able to make my own small and probably modest contribution to the mayhem in George Square at the weekend. Thank you.
Thank you. Could you remind me if you moved your amendment?
I moved. Yeah.
Thank you. I now call on Annabel Goldie to speak to and move Amendment 4970.1. 7 minutes, please.
Yes, Deputy Presiding Officer, thank you. I have to say that in seeing the title of today's debate, I was reminded of a time when in this chamber the St Andrews Day debate was confined to members' business, and now it is elevated to the status of a Scottish Government debate. And I think that is entirely appropriate, so I hope the Cabinet Secretary is not too stunned at that acquiescence. As this chamber is aware, I believe in the United Kingdom, and I believe in Scotland's place in that union. And you don't have to be a member of the Scottish National Party to be proud of Scotland and her achievements. And no one in this chamber has a monopoly on patriotism. And I think Patricia Ferguson made the point well, and I thank her for her support of my amendment. And so the Scottish Conservatives welcome this opportunity to celebrate Scotland and the St Andrews Day tradition. And I would say to Margaret MacDonald as to how we might think of a mechanism for enhancing this celebration. Well, I celebrate it by just being me. And I think that's what an awful lot of people in Scotland do. St Andrew was, of course, the first apostle. He was a fisherman on the northern shores of the Sea of Galilee. But it wasn't until the end of the first millennium that St Andrew's links with Scotland were established, when he was made the patron saint of Scotland after some of his relics were brought by St Rule to St Andrews, where they remain to this day. And other relics can be found in Patras in Greece. I have personally viewed them there, in Amalfi in Italy, in Warsaw in Poland, and in St Mary's Roman Catholic Church in Edinburgh. So he was well-travelled in death, but no less well-travelled in life, because he preached along the southern borders of today's Ukraine, along the Black Sea, as well as the Dnieper and Volga rivers. And for this reason, he became a patron saint of Russia, Romania, and the Ukraine. However, the temporal reach of St Andrew does not end there, with his patronages and sainthood extending from Luga to Escaria, and even as far as Barbados. And the global reach of St Andrew is not limited merely to those countries that enjoy him as their patron saint. This year alone, individuals of all nationalities will gather from Australia, New Zealand, the USA, Canada, and from Bonn to Brussels to celebrate the saintly feast day. Now, the Cabinet Secretary asked me about UK celebrations of St Andrew, and I'm quite surprised at that request, because in her own motion she actually notes that many events will take place in the rest of the UK, but to help her out, I can confirm to her that many Scots will congregate in London, Cambridge, Bedford, Dorset and other parts of England to celebrate St Andrew's Day.
Cabinet Secretary.
I don't dispute that, and that's why we have it in our motion. What I don't understand are what are all these celebrations that are going to be taking all over Scotland, which will be celebrating Scotland's place in the UK in Scotland. Perhaps you will give us a long list.
Annabel Goldie.
Because I think that is instinctively what many people in Scotland, hundreds of thousands of them apparently, according to recent polls, feel is part of their identity. They don't have a problem with that. I appreciate the Cabinet Secretary has a problem with that, but it is not a problem shared, I think, with the majority of people in Scotland. And St Andrew, as well as his saltire, is, let me make clear, Deputy Presiding Officer, no means the sole property of Scotland, let alone the SNP or any other form of nationalism. Now, this debate does call on us to celebrate Scotland, something that I genuinely always welcome the opportunity to do, because we have a great deal to celebrate. We have a distinct culture as well as history, and our contribution to the world at every level cannot be understated. I celebrate these as a Scot, but I also celebrate all of these attributes alongside hundreds of thousands of other Scots as part of the United Kingdom. Let's remember 800,000 Scots live elsewhere in the UK. Presiding Officer, from a union inspired out of pragmatism and rationality, one of the world's most wonderful and remarkable democratic countries has developed and grown. Of course, Scotland, England, Wales and Northern Ireland have many individual successes to extol, but I believe that our greatest successes, those which we can celebrate the most, are those that define who we are as people and what we are as a nation, are those that were made not acting by alone and looking inward, but those that we made together looking outward as part of that remarkable union, the United Kingdom. And let me just remind the Chamber, Deputy Presiding Officer, it was together as part of that United Kingdom that we led the fight against slavery, delivered huge social reform and universal franchise. That was all made possible by the acts of the Parliament of the United Kingdom. And as such, we can all, Scots and English alike, take pride in that. I'm getting a little tight for time, Ms MacDonald. I have referred to in my contribution.
Marco MacDonald. Thank you. On a matter of historical accuracy, we have nothing to be proud of in Scotland in the slave trade.
My point is that it was a United Kingdom Parliament that put an end to slavery, and we were part of that. We were part of that. It was also as part of the United Kingdom that we led the fight against totalitarianism in all its insidious forms, from fascism to communism. And Patricia Ferguson quite rightly reminded us of the STUC's role every year in making sure we never forget the importance of that fight. It was together as part of the United Kingdom we created perhaps the most respected public health institution in the whole world, the NHS, which continues to ensure to this day that everyone in the United Kingdom, regardless of status, receives a health service they need free of charge. And interestingly, it was also together as part of that United Kingdom we brought a common market to the nations of our union a century before Europe did, and that brought unparalleled prosperity to the partners of the UK. But, Presiding Officer, it is clear from the other benches and from the Cabinet Secretary's contribution that there is a belief that we hear with increasing frequency that Scotland, they claim, is hampered by this union. We are, they insist, somehow held back because we're part of the UK. Only with independence, they assert, can we really be a successful nation. But I think that incantation is nothing more than tilting at windmills, because we didn't achieve these defining successes alone. We accomplished them together as part of a union of nations. And in doing so, we crafted who we are as people, as well as who we are as a people. And I have to say that nationalism, with its instinct to look inwards, I think neglects this fact. Presiding Officer, in a globalised world, separatism cannot be the answer, and exactly the time we should be working together to face the difficult challenges and uncertainties that abound in our modern world, I have to question how separation can help that. The difficulty with separation is that risk, and I'm not saying that's culpable, I'm just saying it can happen, of introspection and marginalisation. So, Presiding Officer, can I return to our patron saint Andrew? Because what St Andrews reached throughout the United Kingdom as well as the world shows us is how interconnected our identities, our cultures, our histories, our successes, and most importantly of all, our futures are with one another. So can I end by adding my name to those who proudly celebrate Scotland, but also by speaking out for the majority of Scots who celebrate our successes, not alone by themselves, but as part of that enduring union. And I move the amendment in my name.
We now turn to the open debate. Speeches of 6 minutes, please, with a little bit of time at this stage for interventions. I call Roderick Campbell to be followed by Margaret McDougall.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. As the MSP for North East Fife, home to the town of St Andrews itself, it's a privilege to be able to participate in today's debate on Scotland's Day of National Celebration. I'm delighted that this year's programme of events in celebration of St Andrews is busier than ever before. St Andrews itself, of course, is currently holding the St Andrews Festival, which runs until the weekend. And that is just one of the major events planned for Scotland this week, alongside programmes such as Sing Scotland and Book Week Scotland, which tie in perfectly with the year of Creative Scotland. From previous debates, I understood until now there to be a general cross-party agreement on having a public holiday on St Andrews Day, on the internationalism of our patron saint, and on the need to put aside political differences so that we can celebrate Scotland's National Day together as people of Scotland. As has been pointed out several times in the past, however, St Andrew isn't exclusively ours. Other countries, including Russia and Greece, respect him as their own patron saint. And Greece, despite its further bailout, certainly needs a patron saint looking after it and its people. Turning to the date itself, the 30th of November, the date has its obvious significance in Scotland, but it also captures worldwide significance. In 1786, Peter Leopold Joseph of Habsburg-Lorraine, the Grand Duke of Tuscany, abolished the death penalty, the first European state to do so.
Cities across the globe now celebrate Cities for Life Day in memory of that pioneering act of humanity. In 1872, the first international football match took place in Glasgow between Scotland and England. And in 1934, the Flying Scotsman became the first steam locomotive to officially exceed 100 miles per hour. And finally, and not least important, in 1982, Michael Jackson's Thriller album was released. All of these may only have a tenuous connection to St Andrews and to Scotland, but they all took place on the 30th of November, and they're all of great importance in their own rights.
Cabinet Secretary.
Yeah.
Perhaps I could supply a connection with Thriller. Apparently Michael Jackson, or certainly his producers, in terms of the film or the video, was inspired by Tam O'Shanter, and he could perhaps reflect the theme, so there may well be a Scottish connection to Thriller.
Roderick Campbell.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that useful piece of information. The Cities for Life Day is an event that does not gather as much interest in Scotland on the whole as it does elsewhere. In a country that's not had the death penalty since the 60s, this may be understandable, but on the day we celebrate St Andrew, I feel we should all consider the importance and ongoing relevance of Cities for Life Day. Briefly.
Michael MacDonald.
I wonder if the member could say who won the football match.
Roderick Campbell.
It was a 0-0 draw. Of course, St Andrew's Day has also borne witness to cultural and historically significant firsts. As I've just been saying to Margaret MacDonald, the first international football match gathered 4,000 souls as Scotland played England to a 0-0 draw. Despite the result, the match helped to invigorate in the Scottish people their love of football, which continues to this day, albeit with little current success. Of more interest than the 0-0 draw, however, is another first, the first 100 miles per hour journey by the Flying Scotsman. The locomotive travelled on countless journeys, about 2 million miles covered between London and Edinburgh after that, and I rather fear that it will be a long while before we have a new high-speed train in Scotland. Presiding officers, some may question how these examples are linked to St Andrew's Day. Well, these examples are indicative of several things: humanitarianism, peace, equality, national pride, and links between nations. St Andrew himself, as I mentioned previously, was renowned for his humanitarianism and egalitarianism. And isn't it right that the first international football match, where the terraces brought these 4,000 people together, brought people from different walks of life together in the same circumstances to enjoy a game? Surely that demonstrates those values. And finally, can it not be said that a love of Michael Jackson's Thriller album, which just happens to be the best-selling album of all time, brings millions of people from all walks of life, from all corners of the globe, together in a shared experience? Presiding officer, St Andrew's Day is about much more than Scotland, its own history and culture. It's a day for the entire world. It's a day of tolerance, of pride and equality. And events that, of course, are taking place globally this week reflect that. Today, for example, the Scottish Society of Pennsylvania is hosting their St Andrew's Day supper. And over the next few days, we will see St Andrew's Day's events take place in Brussels, Den Haag in the Netherlands, Bermuda and Manila. Indeed, St Andrews itself is hosting the 10-day-long festival, including a food festival, including an event on Thursday, a Food from Fife dinner in the Old Course Hotel in St Andrews. In addition, there's a Fife Young Fiddlers event, a torchlight parade, and many other activities besides. And last Friday, there was a major poetry event in St Andrews, where the readings of the Ayrshire poet Rab Wilson, who wrote mainly in Scots, led to a very successful evening. I wish all the organisers and participants in these events every success as the first of Scotland's winter festival programmes, and I wish the other later winter festival programmes every success too. I also welcome the Book Week Scotland event, which I'm sure Fiona MacLeod might want to talk about in more detail. Presiding officer, the internationalism of this day cannot be overstated. St Patrick's Day is renowned for people internationally enjoying themselves and celebrating all that is good about Ireland. St Andrew's Day should be the same for Scotland. I welcome the work the Scottish Government is doing to promote the day both within our borders and beyond. This day is clearly very important to the people of Scotland, but also to the people of the world, and it's right that we as a Parliament have this debate. I commend the Government's motion and Patricia Ferguson's amendment. I wish I could understand the logic of Annabel Goldie's further amendment. I see and recognise 300 years of shared history. I see and recognise a social union, but I don't recognise the narrow prism that Annabel Goldie's motion seems to imply. Thank you, Presiding Officer.
I now call Margaret McDougall to be followed by Fiona MacLeod.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I welcome this opportunity to speak in the Scottish Government debate on St Andrew's Day, though a Scottish Government celebration of St Andrew's Day might be more appropriate rather than a debate. So, sorry to disagree with you, Miss Goldie. This is what St Andrew's Day should be, a celebration of Scottish culture and tradition, a way for us to highlight this to the rest of the world and generate trade and tourism. Scotland has such a rich and vibrant history that we should all be proud to be Scottish and share our traditions with the rest of the world. From the Loch Ness Monster to the elusive wild haggis, frolicking around steep mountains and hillsides, but only ever in one direction, the true great chieftain o' the Puddin race. If it is so elusive, you might ask, how am I aware of this habitat? This evidence, of course, comes from the study conducted in 2007 into the Haggai and the stories of the many thousands of tourists who have come in search of the creatures. Leaving aside the unique Scottish wildlife for now, my own region has a vibrant history and many unique Scottish businesses. Ayrshire is, of course, the home of Robert Burns, and there is a museum dedicated to Burns's life in Irvine, where he lived for a time in 1781, where it is said that Burns came to Irvine as a farmer, but left as a poet. And just down the road in Allaby is the Robert Burns Birthplace Museum. The Irvine Burns Club includes a huge range of artefacts and has one of Scotland's most significant Burns treasure troves. The club was opened in 1862, and I would recommend everyone who has an interest in Burns to pay a visit to the centre to see the incredible array of Burns memorabilia. Also in Irvine, we have the annual Irvine Mirimus Festival, which is organised by the Irvine Carter Society and North Ayrshire Council. The Carter Society dates back to the 11th century, when Irvine was the main port for Glasgow, and the men transported the goods by cart to the city. The festival, which dates back to the Middle Ages, arose from Mary Queen of Scots' visit to Irvine in 1563. The festival is a focal point for the town and attracts visitors from far and wide, and many Irvinites return to their home every August to experience the rich pageantry of the fair and the week-long festivities. Not only does this festival promote Irvine and contribute to the local economy, but it brings thousands of people into Scotland. Across the water in Arran, we have the famous Arran cheeses and Arran aromatics. I challenge anyone to go to Arran and not come back with something from one of these two shops, or if it's more your thing, something from the Arran Whisky Distillery, which is one of the few remaining independent distilleries in Scotland. Arran is a beautiful island in itself and attracts visitors from across the world and is known as Scotland in miniature. Many people come to Arran and take a piece of it home through these businesses and more. Many of these businesses have extended their reach not only through Scotland, but trade throughout Europe, Asia and the Americas. I recently attended an Ayrshire Chamber of Commerce event on exporting, and the owner of Arran Aromatics and Arran Cheese said that they used to export to the mainland, which was Ayrshire. Then they extended their export to the Middle East, which was Edinburgh. But now they export to the Far East, which includes Dubai and China. We in this Parliament have a duty to encourage Scottish businesses, culture and tradition to thrive, not only throughout the world, but within Scotland. I also find it a bit strange that one of the biggest celebrations of Scotland is the New York Tartan Week, which takes place in Manhattan every year and is one of the largest outdoor Scottish events. While this is great to promote Scotland abroad, I must ask why we don't have something similar in a more coordinated way in Scotland to promote our culture, history and our businesses on St Andrew's Day. Everyone in Scotland should be able to celebrate St Andrew's Day. And while I was working as a civil servant, we were delighted to be given the day off as a public holiday. But I must admit that the day was used by most of us to get a start to the Christmas shopping, with barely a thought given to St Andrew. Like any public holiday, there is a cost associated with it. If local authorities and National Health Services gave all staff this holiday, someone would still have to provide essential services, so they have to be paid additional hours payments. This is funding that public services simply can't afford, with ever-decreasing resources. As the Labour amendment to the motion states, Scotland's National Day and flag belong to all the people of Scotland, regardless of origin, current residence and political beliefs. Everyone has a part to play in promoting Scotland, not just one party. All of us here have Scotland's interests at heart. And we all need to work together to make sure that we promote Scotland and St Andrew's Day. Thank you.
I now call Fiona MacLeod to be followed by Rob Gibson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and I of course have to begin with referring members to my register of interest, Chair of SLIC and Member of SILIP. So yes, Mr Campbell, you're correct, I am going to talk about Book Week Scotland. I usually in this chamber talk as a very high-tech librarian about evidence, references, citations, but of course I'm also a book lover. And I wanted to read you a quote which I agree utterly with, which I was surprised the Cabinet Secretary didn't repeat today. She gave it in a press release when we were launching Book Week Scotland just a few weeks ago. And she talked about reading's unique capacity for empowerment, enrichment, education, solace, pleasure and growth. A sentiment I'm sure that everyone in this chamber will agree with completely. There's so many aspects to this, our first book week in Scotland. The Cabinet Secretary talked about it being inclusive and a diverse celebration. And I would like to highlight just a few of the areas in Book Week Scotland, which started on Monday and finishes at the end of the week. And one of the areas I wanted to highlight most importantly was the League of Extraordinary Book Lovers. Now, I had put down a motion hoping to get a members' debate on Book Week Scotland and hoped to fly into the chamber for my members' debate replete with my League's cape and my mask, but of course that would not have been appropriate behaviour in a parliamentary chamber. But I've got it in my bag, so I'll wear it later. But the League of Extraordinary Book Lovers are a group of people who have been recruited in the last year and will be online all this week. And if you have any ideas, wanting to know what to read, particular genre and author you need to find out, please email them and their fingers will fly over the keyboard and make sure that you get back a suggestion to keep you busy this week. And I'd like to thank, of course, my constituent from Milton of Campsie, Lindsay Burton, who is one of that extraordinary league. The Cabinet Secretary referred to the reading hour, which is 11 o'clock on St Andrew's Day. I'm not suggesting that everybody stops working, but in the long list of celebrations that the Cabinet Secretary read out, I think it would be nice if we could all take a quiet moment at 11 o'clock on St Andrew's Day and read a piece of Scottish literature. Of course, in my members' debate, I could have just said, right, everybody get your books out and read, and we could have had a quiet 45 minutes. A couple of the other things that I wanted to highlight were, one of the ones that I particularly liked was the family pack of 3 books that's going to be presented to every Primary 1 pupil in the country. It's so important that we start children reading at an early age, but also that we encourage their parents and their carers to read with them, to introduce that love of literature. And of course, again, a constituency connection. One of the books in the pack is by the Children's Laureate, Julia Donaldson, who's one of my constituents. It's her book, Jack and the Flum Flum Tree. Lots of local events in my constituency, and one of the things that I was pleased that we were doing, again, on the Introducing Scottish Literature to young folk is that our book buck sessions in our libraries in Bishopbriggs, Lennoxtown, Lenzie, William Patrick and Westerton libraries, all those book bug sessions will be on a Scottish theme throughout this week. And again, the Cabinet Secretary referred to the book My Favourite Place, and I have, of course, got a copy with me. I'm not going to ask you all to read, but one of the things I suggested in my member's motion early in the month was that we all got given copies of these, and yes, please stay at home and read it, but also think of where you can take them out to donate to other people. I've decided this year to take them out to care homes and sheltered housing within my constituency. But when I actually got the book, it's quite physically difficult, perhaps, if you've got arthritic hands. So I spoke to the Book Trust, and there is an audio version of the book on their website, which they are quite happy for us to download onto a CD and take with us along if we're taking them to older people or the visually impaired, which, you know, again, it's about making sure that literature is there and available for all of us. So in closing, Presiding Officer, in true librarian fashion, can I turn to my bookmarked page in My Favourite Place and say to you that two of the entries in it that particularly caught my eye were The Island of South Rona by Valerie McElreevy, an island off the island of Skye where I visit every year and which my Dalmatian dog is named after, but it's a lovely poem to read. And of course you would not expect me to finish on anything other than Howard Swindle's little ditty, The Mobile Library Man. Please enjoy Book Week Scotland. We'll be back next year, and hopefully I'll get the members' debate next year. Thank you very much.
I now call Rob Gibson to be followed by Mark Griffin.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Part of the idea of celebrating St Andrew's Day on the 30th of November was handed down to us by the old church. We are sort of stumped with that in a way. We can't really change the date, although I have to say that St Columba on the 9th of June is a slightly more attractive time for us to have celebrations. However, let's brighten up the day. A friend of mine who's teaching English as a foreign language in Paris said to me yesterday in an email that she finds that there is an incredible appetite for Scottish culture in all the students learning English with her. And at this St Andrew's Day, recognising that international view, I think shows that people, whilst they're awakened to the possibilities of using the universal language of English, see Scottish culture through that prism and also beyond that prism as well. And I thought to start off with I should discuss our National Day in terms of identities. And I was interested to note, I didn't manage to attend, but Mike Russell gave a lecture in the Neil Gunn Centre earlier this month, the writer in a time of change, Gunn, Walsh and the process of independence. And in it, he said that he shared Neil Gunn's belief that internationalism is richer when nationalisms come together. And the writer of the review said, as an SNP politician, it would have been easy for Mr Russell to distort this interest of Neil Gunn's to his contemporary advantage. Instead, he stuck to his brief, indicating that Gunn's political perspective was as an internationalist as much as a nationalist. And I think that's a great thing for us to bear in mind today, and for us to recognise and celebrate how Scotland is seen around the world and how people here should recognise what they see. Alex Salmond, in a debate at the weekend, talked about the fact that people are entitled to have as many layers of identity as they wish. And I think that's another way of saying that this is the one that we're celebrating just now. Let's not mistake other identities with us at the moment, because he was responding to Bill Clinton, who had said that what we have in common matters more. Well, yes, it matters, but if you aren't yourself, how can you contribute to the more? And I think today we're discussing what matters. And in reasons to celebrate, Presiding Officer, I would say also that we've got reasons to remember with gratitude some of the people who cannot celebrate with us now. First of all, I'd like to mention David Morrison, who was a librarian in Wick, who came up from Glasgow and was the author of the Scotia Review, and was a great facilitator of arts activities, who died a few months ago. Also, among the musicians, Ian Hardy and Derek Hoy will not be playing today, nor the great Michael Mara. So, we must celebrate the fact that our music in particular is one of the things that attracts people to Scotland as it is, and the New Year celebrations are part of that. But St Andrew's Day allows us to think why it is that our own music has become even more popular. And I'm thankful to Donald Shaw, the director of Celtic Connections Festival, which is part of our winter festival, for enlightening us. Partly it's about the changing face of the way the music has been presented. Swapping white heather and kilts for Doc Martens and T-shirts has helped, as has the way the music itself has loosened some of its shackles. Celtic Connections has been at the heart of that process. And I think Scottish music today is something that is cool. It's always been cool, but it's been seen in many more places where people can judge it against everyone else's music. And I think that what Donald Shaw says there means that for the many people who want to celebrate St Andrew's Day around our country, that they will do so through poetry and song. I hope to contribute to that myself. So I believe that when we're talking about the outlook for Scots on this St Andrew's Day, we should also recognise that people from 5 continents come to play in this country at Celtic Connections and are preparing to do so just now. The 5 continents, not 5 countries. Presiding Officer, I think Scots are seen around the world as a welcoming people. I think that the winter is not off-putting. I think that St Andrew's Day as a national day is worth giving a lot more weight to. And I would certainly think that the idea of people here singing traditional music or whatever kind they like is one of the best things that can happen. I see the Daily Record today is talking about people saying how they feel much healthier by singing. That is, of course, included in the motion that I lodged on Scotland Sings, and that itself runs from St Andrew's Day to the 2nd of December, and it considers that singing is good for you and that it should make you smile. Well, I hope that St Andrew's Day does make us smile, and I hope that personally I can add to that contribution that allows us to feel good about ourselves in this country. If the Parliament, Presiding Officer, does not feel that, then, it can get bogged down in analyses of ways in which we might look at these things through the prism of the UK. There isn't British literature. There isn't British traditional music. There is Scottish literature. There's Scottish music. These are means by which we will celebrate our National Day, and I hope that even the Tories will recognise that.
I now call Mark Griffin, to be followed by Willie Coffey.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I welcome the opportunity to speak in a debate today. When I saw the motion and I sat down to write a speech last night, I thought, really, where do I begin and how do I cover a celebration of Scotland's people, their history, food and drink, traditional and contemporary culture in 6 minutes when there's so much to talk about and so much happening on the day itself. Just the other week, we had a members' debate related to Scotland's film and television industry, which highlighted the excellent locations and production talent which we have here. And I think that's the most effective way for us to celebrate and showcase our traditional and contemporary culture to the rest of the world. And I'm sure in this year, the Year of Creative Scotland, that industry will continue to flourish. Food and drink was another area I wanted to touch on in my contribution today. And those are industries which we should rightly celebrate and promote, as they have tremendous potential for growth and already contribute massively to the economy. Historically, our national drink has been the big-ticket export item, but it's a much more modern drinks company that have been grabbing a lot of the headlines recently. Brewdog was set up as a company in 2007, and in a few years are competing strongly in the international drinks market, of one of the best-selling beers in Scandinavia, and one of their founding members became Scotland's youngest ever Entrepreneur of the Year in 2010. Scotland's food industry has always performed well and has a good reputation internationally. As soon as you get past things like deep-fried confectionery
in aspects of the caricature of the Scottish diet. That's because of the wide range of high-quality produce Scotland has. Scotland's restaurant sector has also been successful in being able to blend historical influences with the contemporary. With immigration from Europe and Asia, there was inevitably restaurants which popped up to reflect those cooking styles and foods used by other cultures. But if you look at the menu of an Italian, Indian or a Spanish tapas bar restaurant, you won't have to look that closely to see the Scottish influence on the cuisine from other countries, and that's how it's successfully been blended. As a country, we also have a rich sporting history to celebrate. In football, the Scottish Cup is the world's oldest national trophy, first contested in 1873, and while the national team have often failed to live up to the expectation of a sometimes sport-obsessed nation, our domestic teams have often punched above their weight in European competition. Aberdeen, Celtic and Rangers have all achieved notable success, and some of us can only hope that history will repeat itself in that front, maybe in Wembley next May for some of us of a certain persuasion. But there's often a debate about what the national sport of Scotland actually is, and a lot of people would say football. But the worry for me is that the national sport has moved on from perhaps possibly being football to be complaining about football. The national pastime recently certainly seems to be complaining about the performances of the Scotland football team rather than becoming more active and getting more involved in the sport. So much time and column inches dedicated to debating issues around the Scotland team rather than boosting the levels of physical activity upwards to what we have historically known in Scotland. But I hope that the Olympics and a successful Commonwealth Games will provide the inspiration and facilities a lot of people need. The motion today specifically mentions the launch of Book Week Scotland, Scotland's first celebration of reading, as an event taking place around St Andrew's Day, and will contribute to the celebration of Scotland's traditional and contemporary culture. Last night there was an event in Cumbernauld Library, which unfortunately I wasn't able to attend. That was Harry the Polis Morris, and he was given a reading from a series of books where he calls himself an observer of life. Harry was a police officer in Glasgow and Strathclyde for 30 years, and I've read some of his quite funny short stories of some of the situations he found himself during his time in the job. So I know it would have been a fantastic night in Cumbernauld and a great way to start Book Week Scotland. With the launch of Book Week Scotland and the local events planned over the next few weeks, it highlights just how important our local libraries are in documenting our own people and history, and makes it accessible to everyone in the community to research, regardless of their ability to get onto the internet, as many of us take for granted. Just the other month, I was able to attend an event in Kilsyth Library, which was showcasing the contribution ordinary people from Scotland made to the international brigades who went to fight fascism in the Spanish Civil War. And that local demonstration was enough to stimulate debate and start people researching if anyone from Kilsyth went to join the international brigades and has identified another people from our own local history, and work has started towards erecting a memorial to them in Kilsyth. But without those local libraries as that hub for that sort of activity and historical documentation and research, it wouldn't have been possible for us to come together as a community for that sort of project. And so in closing, I would like to specifically highlight the contribution our libraries and staff make to celebrating our people, our history and our culture. Thank you.
Thank you. I now call on Willie Coffey to be followed by Margaret MacDonald. There is plenty of time for interventions, and we will be generous with time should you wish to take slightly more.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. I must say I'm still reeling a bit from the offering from Annabel Goldie there, in contrast with the really positive offering of examples to celebrate Scotland and St Andrew's Day. What Mrs Goldie seemed to offer us was, and to trumpet the abolition of slavery, was the best example that she could come up with.
I could perhaps remind Annabel Goldie that even in the new emerged United States of America, slavery had been abolished in the majority of the states by 1804, but the British Empire hung on to the profits from it for another 29 years before it was abolished in 1833. I certainly will.
Annabel Goldie.
I think the member may have misconstrued what I've been saying. I was very clear to both pay tribute to the Cabinet Secretary, who, as Margaret MacDonald pointed out, listed many very welcome and positive activities reflecting the celebration of St Andrew's Day. I'm merely observing that hundreds of thousands of Scots believe you can't just look at this in a complete vacuum, and I was merely pointing out that there is a shared history, a shared culture, and I personally think it's right to reflect that.
Coffee.
Well, thank you very much for that clarification, but if that's the best example you could come up with, I think there's really a struggle there to present your case. The stories about Andrew and the Apostle are many and they're varied. He was the first Apostle and the follower of Christ. We share him with many nations, as members have said, from Greece, Russia, Ukraine and others. His relics are found in Scotland, Greece, Italy and Poland, and are a crucial part of the Christian tradition of celebrating his feast day on the 30th of November. I had the pleasure some years ago to stand beneath the magnificent statue of St Andrew in the Vatican, unveiled in 1640, and above which is a relic from the cross in which he was martyred by the Romans, and to appreciate the close association Scotland has with him. Interestingly, the flag of the island of Tenerife looks very similar to our own Scottish saltire. One story being that it was adopted in recognition of the bravery of Scottish sailors at the Battle of Santa Cruz in 1797, a battle led by Admiral Nelson, which ended in defeat for Nelson, and with him losing part of his arm as a consequence. This, presiding officer, has got nothing at all to do with St Andrew, but it has a clear and a possible link with Scotland. So every time you see a picture of Admiral Nelson with his right arm inside his coat, you can proudly share the knowledge of how and when that happened and its connection with Scotland. Curiously, presiding officer, the modern-day manifestation of the cross of St Andrew in many places depicts it as a dark blue, when in fact it is azure blue, as close to the colour of the sky as we can get, and defined as such by this Parliament some years ago and by colleagues still serving in the Parliament today, as I understand. I suspect, though, that the adoption of dark blue had more to do with the limited methods of producing early dyes for colouring garments, dark blue being both easier to produce and providing us with a stark contrast with colours adopted by opponents in other places. Anyway, Andrew's place as patron saint was established very early in Scotland's history and provides our modern Scotland with an association with an apostle of Jesus and a beautiful and hopefully plausible explanation of how our flag came to be what it is. In this modern Scotland, of course, we choose to commemorate St Andrew's Day in a rich variety of ways involving music, theatre and literary events across Scotland. Our schools bring the story of Andrew to life, celebrating our connection with him and promoting Scotland and the best that we have to offer. Scotland's first National Book Week, mentioned in the Cabinet Secretary's motion and in her speech, is featuring strongly in my own constituency, with events taking place in Kilmarnock, featuring contributions from local Ayrshire writers and others. I should say that there is something of a cultural renaissance taking place in Kilmarnock these days, with the town being shortlisted for the Creative Places Award. We've had some magnificent events at the Burns Monument Centre, the Dick Institute and the beautifully restored Palace Theatre and Grand Hall buildings, as well as some incredible work going on at the Centre Stage Theatre in town. Visitor numbers are climbing, and a range of events involving music, the arts and literature have seen the town begin to reclaim its creative heritage. As members will know, of course, the Robert Burns' first book, the Kilmarnock edition, was printed in the town, and we are the only school in Scotland to have 2 Nobel Prize winners as former pupils, and those were Sir Alexander Fleming and John Boyd Orr. And we have some contemporary writers too, like Willie McIlvanney, and more recently Zoe Strachan and our fellow Ayrshireman Rab Wilson, who are making quite a contribution to the literary landscape. Not forgetting, of course, our local contemporary rock and roll stars, Biffy Clyro, who talk up the town whenever they get the chance. Now, East Ayrshire Council's cultural development leader, Philippa Aiken, quite rightly says, in my view, that the town has been a creative town for generations, and recent investment by the Council and other organisations has certainly brought an exciting new era to this part of Ayrshire. Presiding Officer, St Andrew's Day marks the start of Scotland's Winter Festival, and as the Cabinet Secretary also remarks, it gives us a fantastic opportunity to celebrate Scotland's people and our history. I took that opportunity to look back and discover my own family history, using the impressive genealogy search facilities at the Burns Monument Centre, discovering as I did that my own ancestors arrived in Kilmarnock from County Tipperary in Ireland in 1850, a turbulent time for both Scotland and Ireland. Events of some significance in the past can explain the present to us and give us a glimpse of our possible future. St Andrew, the Apostle, knew nothing of Scotland, our nation not yet born. But as each St Andrew's Day arrives, we can reach out to him, retell his story and the story of Scotland, and in so doing offer an enthusiastic world audience a closer look at the richness of what modern Scotland has to offer. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now call on Margaret MacDonald to be followed by Joan McAlpine.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I'd firstly like to thank Dennis Canavan in absentia, because it was Dennis who made sure that this was going to be a day that we would celebrate in Scotland. And he did it against the odds too. So I'm sure he'll be celebrating, probably with Iron Brew. I did suggest to the Cabinet Secretary that although I very much appreciated the range of activities, and when we heard about the book week from Fiona MacLeod, I was even more impressed. But I think the big idea of the big competition is still on, and somebody should be thinking about that to pull everything together, because it should be a celebration of Scottishness. We should just enjoy being ourselves for a day. And Annabel Goldie, if she wants to be British, she can be British, but she'll be left out the party, because everybody else will want to be Scottish. And I don't see why they shouldn't be. We have nothing to apologise for. And every other day of the year we can be as international as we like, and we can share our patron saint with whoever we want to. But just in that one day, let's be Scottish.
Margaret MacDonald. Sorry, Deputy Presiding Officer, I've tried the debate to illustrate. I believe you can be Scottish and British. I and an awful lot of other people don't have a problem with that. I'm just sorry other members in the Chamber seem to find that completely repugnant.
Margaret MacDonald.
Presiding Officer, I don't find it repugnant. I find it awful sad that because of the politics that we have in here just now, Annabel feels that she's got to be British on the day of celebration of Scottishness. But after that expression of togetherness, I wonder if I might offer just a little bit of constructive criticism. We are in danger of becoming very, very divided. We're not having a civil war. We're having a civil referendum. And we're in danger of dividing ourselves. And we can gain nothing from that. But unless we run a good referendum, Scots will be much less inclined to celebrate St Andrew's Day following the referendum. Now, by a good referendum, I mean that people must feel that they own it. It's theirs. It's not the province of any party. It belongs to the Scots, each and every one of us. None of us any more important than the other in how we interpret it. But to do that, the basis of that is information. Everybody else will know that in here too. People are saying to them, but I don't know where the information is. I don't know the answer to this, that and the next thing. I want to know about defence. I want to know about the currency. I want to know about Europe. I think that we have got time to provide that information in a neutral, balanced way, not in a party political way at all. But if there are choices to be made, and of course there are choices to be made in all of the big questions that we'll put to Scots, and they'll answer them in their own way, but they can only do it if the information's there. And I'm really disappointed, to be perfectly honest with you, in the government for not having the gumption to realise that that comes before all the party political nonsense that will divide us, I think, to no good effect. People have told me that they very much want to, in the case of taxi drivers in Edinburgh, they very much want to be able to discuss it with visitors who come into their cab, because foreigners coming to Scotland just now, they know that there's something happening and they want to know what it is. Now, the taxi drivers have all told me that they would like to be able to discuss it, but they need information with which to do that. And so therefore I would suggest, just as another idea for St Andrew's Day that jumps off from St Andrew's Day, we provide that information for people who want it, because all Scots can be ambassadors for Scotland. And I think that would be much more likely to stimulate interest in and knowledge of the real Scotland. And although Margaret McDougall gave a very funny speech there about one-legged haggises or something, there's a real deep Scotland about which many of our fellow Scots know very little. And so I think one of the things that we could do is stimulate interest in that. And we won't do it if we in some way apologise for being Scottish and say it has to be diluted by saying that we're British. I can feel just as British as anybody else, believe it or not, because I have a great deal in common with all the other folk on this island. But I've got a friend in Barbados. She's perhaps my best friend, and I can feel something in common with her as well. And so therefore, I don't think there's any great merit in saying I'm Scottish and British other than I'm Scottish and I'll feel all sorts of other identities all over the world and with different causes. And maybe we should start thinking outwardly properly instead of stopping our internationalism at Dover, because that's a guy-limited way to celebrate the fact that we say we come from the country that Rabbie Burns described as offering a brotherhood of man throughout the world. Now, I realise that we don't celebrate Burns till January, but I celebrate it every month, to be quite honest with you. However, if we can celebrate St Andrew and his influence in the world and his influence in us, just as Scots, then I think that will be much more satisfactory than somehow making it into a half-baked British apology. So I would appeal to Annabel, who I know is as Scots as I am, and is just tainted at the moment because we've got the possible divisiveness of a referendum. I'd appeal to her, just get up and have a good shugle around, Annabel, and be as Scottish as I know you are. You don't have to apologise for it to anybody.
Many, many thanks. I now call on Joan McAlpine to be followed by Hanzala Malik.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Many speakers have already mentioned the Saltire Cross of St Andrews, which has its origin in East Lothian in the south of Scotland region I represent.
Want to put your microphone up, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Many speakers have already mentioned the Saltire Cross of St Andrew, which has its origin in East Lothian as part of the south of Scotland region I represent. It's already been said that St Andrew is an international patron saint. He's the patron saint of many countries, but the only other sovereign state that I can see, with a saltire in its flag, and I stand corrected if I've made an inadvertent error here, is the flag of Jamaica. So in the spirit of the Labour Party's internationalist amendment, I would like to say it really pleases me that we share a saltire with Jamaica. The Jamaican flag is a gold saltire cross in a black and green field, which are the Pan-African countries, and it was adopted in August 1962, the first Jamaican Independence Day. And, Presiding Officer, I hope the whole Chamber will agree with me that it's highly appropriate that this week, the week in which we celebrate St Andrew's Day, we've heard that Usain Bolt, the world's fastest man and Jamaican superstar athlete, will compete in the Commonwealth Games in Glasgow in 2014. And I look forward to the saltire of Jamaica flying side by side with the saltire of Scotland during the Games, hopefully as the medals of Scottish gold are being distributed. If I could spare a few moments to look at Annabel Goldie's warning that somehow national identity could become introspective with political independence, I would ask her to look to Jamaica for inspiration. There's a small island nation with strong links to both Africa, as reflected in its flag, and to the UK. And indeed, before 1962, it flew the Union flag and, of course, remains a high-profile member of the Commonwealth. Thousands of Jamaicans have made their home in the UK, particularly in the big English cities. Just like the Scots Miss Goldie mentioned earlier, many have joint identities, but that doesn't make them feel apologetic for being Jamaican. And by the same token, thousands of Irish people have made their homes in the UK and can celebrate their cultural identity. I'll just make some progress without feeling that it's somehow disloyal or disrespectful to their adoptive home, and without feeling that the political sovereignty that complements their national identity is somehow a threat to anyone else or makes them in some way introspective.
Anna Muldooley.
Thanks, Ms Calpine, for giving way. And to be fair, I think she makes a legitimate contribution to the debate. But I would point out two things. First of all, I have never in any way indicated I feel I have to apologise for being Scottish. And Margaret, to her credit, acknowledges that I'm as proud as anyone can be to be Scottish. And in relation to Jamaica, I mean, I think Joe McAlpine will acknowledge that the Jamaicans to whom she referred, at least in the UK, can actually vote for a Westminster Parliament. So it's not just that they sit in isolation, they actually make a contribution to this broader sense of fellowship.
Joan McAlpine.
I thank the member for her intervention, and I accept that Jamaicans in the UK can vote, and Irish people in the UK can also vote for the Westminster Parliament. So I suspect that wouldn't change for Scots who lived in England after independence.
Okay.
I greatly appreciate it, but her analogy with the West Indies, we shouldn't allow it to go. Because if we think of the Britain and the British Isles that we will have after a successful yes vote in the referendum, it will be very much like the West Indies. We call them the West Indies, but they know the difference between Jamaicans, Barbadians, Antiguans and so on. And the relationship in the British Isles, as they will still be called, I'm sure, in fabulous China, will be roughly the same as there is in the West Indies if we want it to be like that.
Joan McAlpine.
I think that's a fair point that the member makes, and I think it's also worth observing, as I noticed during the Olympic Games, that Jamaica plays cricket, I believe, as part of the West Indies team, but in the Olympic Games competes as Jamaica, and given their medal haul this year, I don't imagine there'll be any plans to change that. I have to make progress, and I did want to say a little bit shifting onto local matters. I opened the speech by saying that the saltire has its origins in East Lothian, way back in 1832 AD, where a legendary battle was fought near the town of Athelstinford, and according to legend, an army of Picts under the High King of Alba, aided by a contingent of Scots, they had a victory over some Angles and Saxons under King Athelstan. Well, I actually personally don't know if it's true or a legend. It's a nice story. More importantly, apparently it led to the adoption of the St Andrew's Cross as Scotland's national flag when a saltire was apparently seen above the battlefield and taken as a portent. As a result of this legend, today we have celebrations in East Lothian. There's a saltire festival there, which is a fantastic event. It's been a massive success for the last 3 years, and it's expanded to a 9-day festival which celebrates our music, culture and heritage. This year celebrations have already begun with last Friday with the Haddington Pipe Band Whisky dinner, and on Sunday a service was held in the beautiful old church of Athelstinford with hymns and songs about St Andrews and a ceremonial handing over of the flag. After that, we had an amazing week of events, including a race day, a farmers' market and educational events, and the festival will culminate this Sunday with a Scottish music and literary ceremony celebrating the best in music and verse that Scotland and East Lothian has to offer, with contributions from Barbara Dixon, North Berwick Community Choir, Fiona and Kirsty Johnson, Caitlin Bruce, Alan Gay and Colin Will. And I would urge all those who wish to celebrate St Andrew, they could do no worse than join the locals in East Lothian for Scotland's Saltire Festival. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. Now call on Hanzala Malik to be followed by Stuart Stevenson, and there is time in hand for interventions.
Good afternoon. I welcome the opportunity to take part in today's debate on Scotland National Day, the St Andrews public holiday. The Act of 2007, first supported by the Scottish Labour Party, Jack McConnell MSP's administration, followed by Members' Bill by Dennis Carnavan St Andrews Day is Scotland's national day. The Labour motion reflects this, that the St Andrews flag belongs to all Scots regardless of origin or current residence or political belief. And I think that's an important point to take on board. Labour amendment also notes that St Andrews Day makes the start of Scotland's winter festival with Burn Supper Night, including Christmas and Hogmanay, New Year's Day, and other cultural festivals which take part this time of the year. Particularly at a time of economic downturn, it is important that festivals, opportunities to attract more tourists to come to Scotland and promote Scottish products. And some members have touched upon that, and I welcome that. Let me show you another side of St Andrews Day celebration. In Nuremberg, they have the Burn Supper every year, and it's very successful. In fact, you'd be considered one of the lucky ones who gets a position, a place at that Burn Supper. And I would like to ask the Cabinet Secretary to perhaps pursue that type of activity around the world, as some members have already indicated. Not only just the USA, but all the countries we have twinning agreements with, all the countries that we engage with, all the countries who are friendly with the Scottish culture, that we actually develop this, because links are important. There has been some talk about we in Scotland seem to have fallen behind with our overseas activity. You can't engage with people around the world unless you're willing to get up and go and do it. So therefore, of course.
Can I say we have absolutely not fallen behind in our overseas activity, very extensive. Indeed, I was in India only a few weeks ago, and one of the celebrations I had with some of the villagers that I met at a water development project was discussing poetry and our internationalism, Rabindranath Tagore, being inspired by Robert Burns and Robert Burns' Brotherhood. So our activity is continuing. That visit also was helping bring jobs to Scotland. So in terms of the celebration, I absolutely agree with him that really it's important that we encourage all the international links we have to help celebrate and to make sure there's activity. And we are absolutely, as a government, wanting to do it. But it's not just the government that can encourage our twinning organisations. He knows from the City of Glasgow, there are cities and towns across Scotland that can also be doing likewise with their twin towns and cities to celebrate Scotland.
And Zala Malik.
That intervention. I'm looking forward to the Cabinet Secretary going to Pakistan and doing similar work there, because Glasgow is twinned with Lahore, and we have a very close and wonderful relationship. And I'm hoping that perhaps we can do a Burn Supper in Lahore, which you could lead. Although we share and hope that years coming to St Andrews Day will become embedded in the culture of Scotland, the Burns Night Supper, as it's turned out, is an important element of that. And I think what I really want to say about the Burns Supper itself is it's become very popular because we offer a vegetarian haggis for all those people who have issues about meat or halal food, and it's very, very popular. But what I would like to ask the Cabinet Minister is, Cabinet Secretary, beg your pardon, is how many ethnic minority events has she or any other member in this chamber visited amongst the minority community to celebrate St Andrews Day? I don't think there has been any. I certainly haven't. And therefore, I think there is an issue here which we have to bridge to encourage minority communities to participate in St Andrews Day. I know that our school children do, and that's a wonderful thing, very, very positive. We're getting to the younger generations, and that's marvellous. But I think moving away simply from the Hogmanay and the Burn Supper, we need to celebrate St Andrews Day just as equally. And I think that's important that we look towards building those relationships. To be truly national celebration, it is important that people should not be excluded from the winter celebrations either. And therefore, the comments that I make about engaging with the communities to encourage St Andrews Day and what it stands for, that is one reason why Scottish Labour Amendment also comments on historic Scotland and its decision to allow free access to some of its facilities. I don't understand why only Scottish Heritage is taken on this challenge. I would encourage all organisations, private museums, various other centres to do the same. I'm very proud of the fact that Glasgow City Council does support free swimming for our youngsters at school. It also provides free swimming for over 60s. I don't understand why all of Scotland can't do the same, and I would encourage that, starting from St Andrew's Day as a marking benchmark position. And also I would say that in terms of castles, there is a charge for our castles. I don't believe our school children should be paying for that. When we start talking about heritage, when we start talking about promoting Scottish history, when we start talking about being engaging with our communities, we need to provide facilities. Glasgow City Council provides free facilities for all its museums. I'm almost out of time, but thank you. When Glasgow City Council provides free access to all its museums and free swimming for the children, free swimming for the elderly community, I think we should replicate that across Scotland to encourage that engagement and that learning process. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Now Colin Stewart Stevenson, after which we move to closing speeches.
Thank you very much indeed, Presiding Officer. Why should we celebrate St Andrew's Day? Some reasons are historical, some cultural, some are even political, some are humorous, and some are personal. Let me just start by extending our knowledge of where this flag is. It's actually a flag in the international signal flags. It stands for the letter M, and it means doctor on board, which of course fits very neatly with our tradition of training doctors around the world. We've heard of countries that have St Andrew as their patron saint. St Andrew is also the patron saint of Patras in Greece, Amalfi in Italy, Lucca in Malta, and Esgueira in Portugal. He was also the patron saint of Prussia and of the Order of the Golden Fleece. Andrew is also the patron saint of the United States Army Rangers. He certainly gets about a bit, and indeed the Church of Scotland has many St Andrew's kirks around the world, and I think that shows the reach of St Andrew. Mark Griffin very nicely and properly mentioned my constituents who founded Brewdog. I have to say that brewery, very successful as it is, run by two young lads of Mark Griffith's age rather than people of my age. The favourite beer from there is one which I can just about make relevant to this debate. Is Trashy Blonde, which is a very nice blonde beer. And that leads me to perhaps one of the reasons why it's a little unwise for the Tories to choose this debate in the way that they do. Because if we want to celebrate St Andrew's Day for party political reasons, I've a better starting point than any of the others. Because the 30th of November 1990 was the day a removal van arrived at number 10 Downing Street to remove Maggie Thatcher from that address. So perhaps the Tories will be celebrating that as well. Others, of course, may have celebrated when I left the Bank of Scotland on the 30th of November 1999. So goose for the gander as well. By moving from banking to politics, I, of course, sought to improve my reputation. Many of us here, too, will have seen, if we've done any genealogical research, that many of our ancestors used the St Andrew's Cross to make their mark on certificates before the days of being literate. The Order of St Andrew in Russia is the highest order of merit in modern Russia. It's a very ancient order that was suspended during the time of the Soviet Union. I do note that the second highest order in Russia is the Order of St George. So we've got things right in that country at least. Recipients of the Order of St Andrew in Russia have been Peter the Great, Mikhail Gorbachev, and less encouragingly, Mikhail Kalashnikov. The name Andrew itself is of interest. It comes from the Greek and it means manly, brave, manhood, valour, a whole series of attributes that I think we can all accept are ones that we should be proud of. Now, the Scots, if we're anything, is not just about 800,000 Scots who live in England. It's about 40 million Scots who live around the world. The majority of the living relatives that I have, of whom I'm aware, live outside Scotland, mostly in the United States, but also in Sweden, in Denmark, in South Africa, Australia, New Zealand and Hong Kong. And I will.
Margaret MacDonald.
I wonder if the member could say if he feels any further away and distant and separate from his family members because they're in different states from himself, because certainly my experience of having a daughter working in Ireland and a sister working in England was that I was just as close to both of them.
The member makes a good point, and of course the bounds of geography in the modern electronic world are much shrunk, and emotionally I feel no distance whatsoever. And of course, my niece in Sweden and my nephew in Denmark are Scandinavians, just as after independence we will continue to be Britons, but by geography rather than by political choice. It's interesting, too, that if we look at what we have achieved jointly with our friends south of the border, I'm approximately 1/4 English myself, so have a number of great-grandparents from south of the border. We have achieved a great deal together, and I think that is to our shared credit. We have fought and won 2 world wars, but of course there were many independent countries joined the alliance voluntarily. We didn't have to be bound in a political union to do that. Presiding Officer, there are lots of local events in lots of different constituencies. We'll celebrate in our own individual way. In my constituency, in Fraserburgh, we will have Travellers' Tales in Fraserburgh Library tomorrow. We'll have great reads for winter nights in Peterhead 2 days later. And on the 1st, we'll have Meet the Author, Shona MacLean in Banff Castle. And that's going to be absolutely excellent contributions to understanding all around the world. It's worth looking at what we have on our own doorstep here. Robert Ferguson has a new statue standing outside the Canongate Kirk, the man that Burns described as elder brother in the Mews, and Adam Smith is in the kirkyard as well. Someone whose works are carried by capitalists around the world and by communists as well. An immense contribution. When Dennis Canavan successfully brought forward his members' bill to create a holiday in Scotland, he worked closely within the powers of the Parliament. We can prescribe and create bank holidays. They are, in a technical sense, only days where banks may not charge interest. That's all a bank holiday actually is. And, of course, he was able to create holidays for civil servants. Would that he had been able, through that member's bill, to create holidays for wider Scotland. It has to be voluntary. It cannot be created by powers of this here. Burns suppers. Yes, I will.
Just for clarification, are you saying if the powers were available that the Scottish Government's position to create an extra holiday on this day?
I no longer, I have to say, do speak for the Scottish Government. I speak for myself when I say that. You'll need to ask others if that's what we want. Bringing my remarks to a close, the remains of St Andrew were taken to the ends of the earth, so no wonder that we who travel to the ends of the earth of Scott have adopted him as our saint.
Close, please.
And finally, Presiding Officer, I visited Hebron in the West Bank in the 1970s. 1,000 years later, freckled Arabs with red hair. The footprint of the Scots is everywhere. The footprint of St Andrew similarly.
Many thanks. Now call on Jamie McGregor, up to 8 minutes, please.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. I'm pleased to close today's debate for the Scottish Conservatives. There have been some good and amusing and interesting speeches from members across the Chamber, and I pay tribute to our former colleague Dennis Canavan, who has consistently campaigned to raise the profile of St Andrew's Day. Now, the Cabinet Secretary asked Annabel Goldie for a list of celebrations, and I will come to that a bit later, but I once pointed out to Dennis Canavan, to his amazement, that Eton College, that unobtrusive school between Windsor and Slough in Buckinghamshire, that educated our Prime Minister and some lesser politicians, has for centuries celebrated St Andrew's Day as a holiday. And the reason is to recognise the importance of Scotland and the Scottish people as part of the family of nations within the UK. The segment of Scottish boys at the college was usually larger than that from Ireland or Wales. And on that day, the unique war game, the Eton war game, is played between the scholars and oppidums, where opposing scrums push a ball backwards and forwards along a brick wall, and a goal is scored perhaps every 20 years. It's similar perhaps to Orkney's annual game between the Uppies and Doonies, and there are plenty of 0-0 draws of the sort mentioned by Roderick Campbell. But the point is not the winning, it's the celebration and the continuity. And a number of members, including Joan McAlpine, have talked eloquently about the history of St Andrew and the Saltire, and I want to enlarge on what she said and remind members exactly how the Saltire became our flag. Precisely 1,180 years ago, in the summer of 832 AD, King Angus II, leading a combined army of Picts and Scots, faced a greatly superior force of invading Northumbrian Angles at Athelstan Ford in East Lothian, just 20 miles from this chamber. The village, which takes its name from the Anglian king, Athelstan, who would be killed in action on that day, is home to our National Flag Heritage Centre. It is housed in a 16th century lectern dovecot built in the reign of King James VI, in whose person the crown of the Scots and of the Angles would finally be joined, not in battle, but in amity. This, of course, was followed by a political union 104 years later, but it got things going in a united direction. And the centre is at Athelstan Ford because on the morning of the engagement, as Joan McAlpine said, white clouds appeared in the blue sky overhead and united to form a tremendous X-shaped cross, a crux decussata, above the field of the battle. Now, it wasn't a UFO, I don't think. This omen was taken by King Angus to be a sign of favour from St Andrew, the brother of St Peter, being in the form of the diagonal cross upon which the saint had been martyred at Patras in Greece. Our arms being victorious on that day, the king decreed that our national flag should be, to use heraldic terms, a silver cross upon an azure field, that much beloved emblem of our nation. Now, the Scottish Conservatives are, like members across the chamber, fully supportive of efforts to promote our world-class contemporary and traditional culture through Scotland's winter festivals, which begin on Friday on St Andrew's Day. And we recognise that tourism and other businesses can need extra promotion during the winter months. It's a very good thing. We want to see a continued focus to boost winter tourism in Scotland. And like other members, I would wish to highlight some of what is on offer in my own region of the Highlands and Islands. The Highland Wildlife Park at Kingussie will be free to visit on St Andrew's Day, while children will enjoy swimming at a range of Highland Council swimming pools as long as they're accompanied by an adult. And Historic Scotland will have a St Andrew's Day ticket giveaway, and entry to many Historic Scotland attractions across the country will be free over the weekend of the 1st, 2nd of December. And I hope many of my constituents and visitors alike can take advantage of these offers. Now, I'd very much like Margaret McDougall's contribution. She mentioned things like haggis, but since St Andrew was a fisherman, it would surely be appropriate to celebrate his day with festivals of fish across Scotland. We, after all, have scallops, herrings, prawns, mackerel, haddock, I mean, we have the best fish in the world. But where are the festivals? We don't have many festivals. And funnily enough, Willie Coffey mentioned Santa Cruz. And I've been to Santa Cruz during a week of Sardine Festival, which they have every year. And it's a tremendous event, bringing thousands of people there, and is generally a great success. And Scotland, I think, is such a beautiful place that it always sells its own beauty. But the trick is to give people more excuses to come here to appreciate that. And winter festivals are great. And I'm also pleased to welcome this year's focus on Scotland's internationally renowned reputation for literature through Book Week Scotland, which I hope, again, many of my constituents will take part in. And I'm delighted that some of my young constituents in Shetland, who are primary school pupils, will be going to care homes for read-aloud sessions where they will read exciting stories to the elderly people in the homes. And I commend Shetland Arts for coordinating that. Campbelltown Library is today hosting a book bug session with songs, stories and rhymes for babies and toddlers and their parents, with a similar event planned in Stornoway Library tomorrow. And I hope also that Book Week Scotland will be a boost to the many small and independent publishers and book retailers in Scotland, who at the moment are facing such intense pressure from huge competition online. Things are very difficult for them. And since Scotland, and particularly Edinburgh, has such a wonderful worldwide reputation for publishing, which goes back for centuries. In fact, Audubon's Birds of America, which the other day was sold for £8 million, is the most expensive book I think ever published, was published in Edinburgh. We shouldn't forget things like that. But today's debate has been, for the most part, useful and constructive, and I support the amendment in the name of my colleague and friend Annabel Goldie, which rightly recognises that Scotland can enjoy the best of both worlds on St Andrew's Day, as well, in fact, as on every other day, celebrating the patron saint that helps underpin our identity, but doing so in the context of our partnership of nations, which is our United Kingdom. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I now call on John Park. Up to 9 minutes, please.
Okay, nice to have some extra few minutes to say a bit about what I think has been an excellent debate this afternoon, and I'll say a bit more about the spirit that's been conducted in later on in my contribution. This is twice in the last 2 or 3 weeks that I've stood here in the chamber and realised that I maybe should have stuck in at school a little bit more. We had a debate about Malawi a couple of weeks ago. I learned so much more about what was happening in that country, but certainly in terms of the information, the debate that we've had today, the history of St Andrew, the things that are happening right across our country just now, and things that have happened in the past, certainly have encouraged me to go away from debate today and have a bit more of a closer look at some of the things that we do, and a bit more learn a bit more about our history in there. And I say that in the sense that St Andrews itself is in the region that I represent. I thought the contribution from Rod Campbell about what happened in and around that area is excellent today. I think it has the way that he managed to bring Michael Jackson into this afternoon's debate is probably one of the most impressive and sophisticated manners that I've ever seen a celebrity brought into a debate here in the Scottish Parliament. So I congratulate him on that. I think the fact that we focus so much on the date and what it means to so many other people, Stuart Stevenson no doubt mentioned 2 or 3 things. I'm sure he kept a few other things away from this debate today that's happened on the 30th November in his life. But again, it does have that significance for people, and that's important for us to recognise.
Stuart Stevenson.
I wonder if the member is aware that people of my generation, who largely learned their Scots history from J.D. Mackey's History of Scotland, absolutely learned nothing whatsoever about St Andrew. I probably wasn't aware of him until I was an adult. And that one of the things today does do is show that there's a much wider appreciation than there was when I was a youngster, and the rest much younger than the Speaker were.
Unknown,
brave
John
enough,
Park.
Mr. Stevenson, to comment on people of your generation, I must admit. So, but I think it's quite clear. I think it's one of the benefits of devolution, and certainly what's happened here in the Scottish Parliament and the work taken forward with Dennis Canavan and the focus put on St Andrew's Day as a holiday, is there is far greater awareness these days, and I think everybody should take credit for that across the chamber and previous parliamentarians as well. The focus on literacy, the focus on access to our historical attractions are all things I think have to be very welcomed and very, very important in terms of making sure that future generations have the benefit of finding out about our culture and history, and maybe Stuart Stevenson mentioned that his generation didn't. In terms of the contribution from my colleague Patricia Ferguson and her focus on the work taken forward to organise the St Andrew's Day March and Rally, which is organised every year by the Scottish TUC. I think it's only right that we take time here in the Scottish Parliament to recognise the significant amount of work that goes into that. As a former employee of the STUC, I know firsthand exactly how much effort goes in to make that happen, not just with people who work in that organisation, but the hundreds of volunteers who support that organisation throughout the year and also on that day as well. And I think people do get involved in these things for many reasons, but Patricia Ferguson mentioned this, the demographic challenges that we've had here in Scotland over the last few years, and the fact that we're now growing as a country, and the fact that we've welcomed so many people into our country, and that is something that we would want to celebrate and hope that they would understand and appreciate our culture even more. We've got new Fifers, we've got new Glaswegians, we've got new Aberdonians, we've got new people all over this great country of ours, and the fact that the STUC marches annually to recognise that, I think, is significant. And I've always been pleased to take part in that rally and that march as well. Maggie McDougall, again, I think when she was talking about the impact on local businesses, aromatics in particular, that just shows that these sort of debates give us an opportunity to highlight how successful these things can be. And we don't have as many opportunities as this as we should have in the Scottish Parliament to talk about successes in our own area. I think Rob Gibson's discussion and debate about the Winter Festival and the amount of visitors that we have from overseas, again, is pertinent. I think we just need to lift our heads up when we're walking up and down from the Parliament on a daily basis to see how many people are actually coming, not just to Edinburgh, but all over Scotland to take benefit for over the next few months for the things that are going to be going on. I also think that the issue around our exports, Mark Griffin spoke about this particularly, and mentioned Brewdog, but I'm the co-convener of the cross-party group on Scotch whisky, and I can see what we are doing there, not just in terms of exporting a product, but exporting working practices and exporting environmental practices. We've got a lot to be proud of there. One thing that I didn't realise Mark Griffin had highlighted that the Scottish Cup is actually the oldest football cup in the world. I didn't know that. I should have known that. I actually participated in the Scottish Cup once for Bunt Island Shipyard, who were an amateur side affiliated to the SFA. Unfortunately, I got booked during the game and cost an amateur side £150, which is money that we didn't have.
I also was very interested in the idea that the Scottish Cup was the oldest cup, but I wonder, as John Park is a football fan, would he reflect my understanding that it's actually the Scottish Junior Cup which is the oldest cup, one which has been won several times by my home team of Linlithgow Rose?
John Park.
I'm not clear on the use of electronic devices actually during a debate, presiding officer, because I would probably refer myself to Wikipedia at this point. But I've also played in the Scottish Junior Cup as well and didn't get booked, or not from my recollection anyway. So if it is the oldest, I've played in both of them. Yeah, certainly.
I'm not aware of which is the oldest competition in history, but I do understand that the actual trophy itself, that the Scottish Cup is the original trophy, and that is the oldest trophy that's played for in world football.
John
and I think that shows that Mark Griffin was perhaps consulting his electronic device in an appropriate manner before getting up and intervening there. I think that there has been a little bit of debate about Annabel Goldie's and the Scottish Conservatives' amendment to the Government's motion today. I just think because of the effort that Annabel Goldie has put in intervening on people and the spirit the debate has been conducted today, that maybe the whips and the SNP can go and change the whip sheet just now and bring some support. I would love to see us move away from this debate today with a consistent position that we could all sign up to, and it means decision time would go a lot quicker as well, Presiding Officer. In terms of the last thing I want to say, the second last thing I want to say, is about the St Andrew's Day holiday, and just to put on record my appreciation of the work that Dennis Canavan did and the fact that there was wider political support for that at the time to bring it forward. It is a shame that we're not able to drive that out in the private sector in the sense that we maybe want to, but the fact that the Scottish Government and many local authorities have taken a lead in this area, I think, is a good thing. I would hope that, in comparison to other parts of the world, that well, you know, we can get on a journey where we could get to the likes of Sweden and Germany and Austria, who have more days holiday, but also have and manage to maintain high levels of productivity. The two aren't incompatible, and I could hope we could have a sensible debate about that at some point in the future here in the Scottish Parliament. In concluding, Presiding Officer, I've enjoyed the constructive debate that we've had today. I think Margaret MacDonald's comments about how the debate we've had today might actually start to percolate into the wider discussions that we're having in the Scottish Parliament here on a regular basis. We've not had the greatest period, I would say, in the last month or so. We deal with serious issues, and sometimes we just take ourselves a little bit too seriously. I think today's debate shows that we can deal with serious issues in a constructive fashion, and I hope that bodes well for the future discussions that we have.
Thank you very much. Now call on Cabinet Secretary Fiona Hislop up until 4:59, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I'd like to thank all colleagues for the debate. I think it has been a very useful debate. I think it's been a very reflective debate and a very informed debate. And we've heard of the number of range of events that are taking place across Scotland, but of course only Jimmy McGregor could open with the discussion about the Eton's School's St Andrew's Day celebration. Now, as somebody who's also had their early years in the vicinity of Windsor, I was brought up in Maidenhead, I do recognise that across the UK and indeed overseas, there are celebrations about our patron saint, and I think that list of the international engagements is very impressive indeed. I did wait to hear that list of events where, you know, the Scotland's place in the UK was being celebrated on Friday. I missed that. And I also think in terms of the reflections, I hope Annabel Goldie genuinely takes the mood and the moment of what the contributions today have been saying to her, in that actually we do recognise there are different levels of identity that people can have, but surely on our one day, our national day, we can enjoy our Scottish celebrations and our identity in terms of who we are and celebrate it in song and literature, as we've heard. There are 365 days of the year. Surely for St Andrew's Day we have that opportunity to come together. And I think that's the point that John Park was saying. It is important that from times we do come together and recognise our strengths as a country and what we have contributed. In terms of the international engagement, there's a lot of things happening from Bermuda to Bangkok, celebrations across the globe. Roderick Campbell, I thought, was an excellent contribution in starting off that debate in terms of that reflection. Indeed, most of the contributions did talk about Scotland's place internationally and the celebrations internationally. I'm also pleased to tell you that when I was in Ottawa last year, I helped launch the Canada-Scotland Friendship Group on St Andrew's Day last year, and it's holding its St Andrew's Day celebration today. And I hope, Presiding Officer, we can send a message from this Parliament to the Parliament in Ottawa and congratulate them on their celebrations. The Scottish Government is going to be represented by the Second Secretary for Scottish Affairs, who is based in Toronto. We had interesting contributions. Willie Coffey talked about the Saltire flag, also about that wonderful statue in the Vatican of St Andrews. Joe McAlpine talked about the Jamaican connections. We also had heard the reflections about the importance to help people understand Scotland who come to visit us. And of course, the launch of the winter festivals, which takes place on St Andrew's Day, allows us to do that. We also want to make sure there are things for people to do. We're always looking for new and innovative ways to encourage people to celebrate. And the decision, therefore, this year of many sports centres to open their doors for free over the St Andrews Day weekend is a welcome innovation. To Patricia Ferguson, she raised the issue that some events might only be, or some places only on a Friday. Can I say to her, if she looks up the site, there are over 40 historic sites that have free access, and many of them are on the 1st and 2nd. And indeed, there are another 76 associations of Scottish visitors attractions that are also available for free access. And again, one of the innovative developments is we now have a St Andrews Day smartphone app, which is available on iPhone and Android. Again, it's an essential guide to our National Day. You can download ideas about how to celebrate St Andrews Day. But of course, I did talk about the importance of St Andrews and St Andrew himself in terms of the town of St Andrew and indeed the university and the founding of that seat of learning, and why literature is so important to Scotland's contribution to the world, and why it's right that we do celebrate this week with Book Week Scotland. Fiona MacLeod gave an excellent speech which outlined some of the issues and some of the events that are taking place around that celebration of reading. It's important, I think, that we do recognise there's going to be a reading hour. I would encourage all of those that are able to do so to take part in that reading hour. Reading to others in local schools, nurseries, playgroups, old folks' home, I think is very important, and that's one of the ways that we can recognise Scotland's literature. Winter festivals are very important to our economy. Yes, we have that cultural celebration, but it's also about enticing people from home and abroad to explore all areas of our country. It's a great place in terms of to come to study, to work, to invest and do business. St Andrews Day allows us to present Scotland as the I nation, a nation innovative in ideas, imaginative and inventive in spirit, international in outlook and individual in experience. We have so much to be proud of, whether it's our research capacity, our renewable sector, but quite clearly in terms of the contributions from Margaret McDougall and Mark Griffins in terms of our world-famous food and drink and our great tourist assets. And I think there's something that perhaps we stumbled across in terms of this debate, and this is where I do turn to Jamie McGrigor and pay tribute to Jamie McGrigor and his contribution, because Nzala Malik made the point that a lot of the celebrations and so many contributions today were actually about burns in the celebration, and our poetry, I think, poetry is a fantastic asset to our literature that needs to be celebrated throughout the year. But because there are burn suppers, people have a hook, they have an event, there's something they can take part in. And I was very struck by Jamie McGrigor's contribution when he talked about St Andrews as a fisherman. And if you think about all that wonderful assets that we have, yes, we want to celebrate our beef and our lamb and our wonderful menus that can be downloaded from said app in terms of the menus that we can have. But perhaps we should think about celebrating St Andrews through fish. A fish supper of a variety of different formats. And perhaps Jamie McGrigor has stumbled across that extra ingredient of how we can actually provide a modern-day celebration that isn't perhaps some of the old-fashioned traditional ones. And perhaps that can be the outcome of this debate, is that we have stumbled across a fantastic idea to celebrate St Andrews Day. Margaret MacDonald.
I couldn't agree more with the Cabinet Secretary, and it's wonderful that Jamie McGrigor should have done it, because we call it a McGrigor supper.
Thank you very much, Margot. Yes, indeed.
Would the Cabinet Secretary perhaps refer to it as the Saltire X Factor?
Cabinet Secretary. I think we're now cooking with gas in terms of the creativity here. But also, in closing, want to make two additional points, particularly. One is also about the importance, I think, reflected in Labour's amendment in recognising Scotland as an inclusive country that does not tolerate racism of any kind. That was demonstrated and has been for many years by the SUC St Andrews Day Anti-Racism March. I have taken part myself in that march and rally. I know my colleague Hamza Yousaf did on Saturday, and I would encourage more of our MSPs to do so in the future. And I do think it is a testament to this debate that we recognise the importance of what we do internally, how we, I think, as Nzala Malik pointed out, the importance of actually involving our ethnic minorities in the celebration. I can assure you that Book Trust Scotland are involving the Scottish Refugee Council in Book Week Scotland as part of this week's celebrations. That's movement in some way, but there's more that can be done. But I also want to close in paying tribute to Dennis Canavan, as Margot MacDonald did in her contribution, because it was he that took forward the St Andrews Day holiday bill in order to try and make sure that within the confines of the powers of this Parliament that we'd made some steps to celebrate that, and I'm glad that across party there was agreement to do that. In terms of what we can do, we want to do more. We know that our young people will be celebrating. We are trying to encourage more schools to celebrate particularly. We know that in the Scottish Borders...
Secretary, there's just too much chattering.
The Scottish Borders, Angus, Dumfries and Galloway and Renfrewshire will be allowing their school children the day off to enjoy the celebrations, and increasingly with more attractions being available, particularly the sports centres, I think in terms of that we're growing that opportunity. I did like Patricia Ferguson's suggestions about how we could involve the retail aspects of shopping on St Andrews Day. I think combined with the fish supper from Jamie McGringer, we're starting to find a kind of really interesting, exciting way to make sure there's plenty on offer as part of our celebrations. But I do want to reflect, Presiding Officer, we should not apologise for celebrating our National Day and what makes us a nation, to celebrate it through our language, through our literature, through our song and our music. And I thought Rob Gibson really caught the mood absolutely right in his reflection about, yes, we can have different identities, and many people have many different identities to celebrate, but on St Andrews Day, please let us be proud in celebrating our great traditions, our great culture, but to do so in a way that offers hands of friendship, not just to others within our own country, as the Labour Amendment sets out, but also internationally. And I'm delighted that across the world, on Friday, across the world, our friends and brothers and our sisters will be celebrating St Andrews Day.
Thank you, Cabinet Secretary. I think the fish suppers could be improved by adopting the Fife habit of salt, vinegar and brown sauce. Next item of business is consideration of a business motion 50... Sorry? Right. The next item of business is consideration of motion number 4947 in the name of Kenny McCaskill on the Statute Law Repeals Bill, UK legislation. I call on Kenny McCaskill to move the motion. Cabinet Secretary.
Formally moved.
The question on the motion will be put decision time. The next item of business is consideration of business motion 5020 in the name of Joe Fitzpatrick on behalf of the Parliamentary Bureau setting out a revision to the business programme for tomorrow. I'd ask any member who wishes to speak against the motion to press the request to speak button now. And I call on Joe Fitzpatrick to move motion number 5020.
And in moving, can I bring the Chamber's attention to a change of business to Warrell to allow a ministerial statement on the UK Public Services Pensions Bill legislative consent motion?
No member is asked to speak against the motion, therefore I will now put the question to the Chamber. The question is that motion number 5020 in the name of Joe Fitzpatrick be agreed to. Are we all agreed? The motion is therefore agreed to. There are 4 questions to be put as a result of today's business. The first question is amendment number 4970.2 in the name of Patricia Ferguson, which seeks to amend motion number 4970 in the name of Fiona Hislop on St Andrews Day, a celebration of Scotland, be agreed to. Are we all agreed? The amendment is therefore agreed to. The next question is amendment number 4970.1 in the name of Annabel Goldie, which seeks to amend motion number 4970 in the name of Fiona Hislop on St Andrews Day, a celebration of Scotland, be agreed to. Are we all agreed? The Parliament is not agreed, therefore we'll move to vote. Members should cast their votes now. The result of the vote on amendment number 4970.1 in the name of Annabel Golding is as follows. Yes, 53. No, 62. There were no abstentions. The amendment is therefore not agreed to. The next question is that motion number 4970 in the name of Fiona Hislop, as amended, on St Andrews Day, a celebration of Scotland, be agreed to. Are we all agreed? The motion is therefore agreed to. The next question is that motion number 4947, in the name of Kenny McCaskill, on Statute Law Repeals Bill UK legislation be agreed to. Are we all agreed? The motion is therefore agreed to. That concludes decision time. We now move to members' business. Members should leave the chamber. Could you please do so quickly and quietly?